Now, how about drums? An instrument everybody loves.
Good evening, evening. How's everyone? How's everyone doing? It's a Thursday evening, just about 20 to 9. I hope everyone is well. I'm just going to say what's up to the chat. Hope you're doing well on this October the 7th, this Thursday. Hope you guys are all doing well. You guys are all feeling well. Obviously, during these times, people are still catching everything that's going right now. We still got things like the cold and the flu, which people seem to have forgotten, but it seems to be that season where people are sort of catching these, regular smegular things, which, hasn't caused lockdown, but it's still causing people problems. So I just want to say, hope you guys are all feeling well and doing well. I'm just going to say, what's up to the chat? So I know a few people came in beforehand. I'm just going to say hello. I said it on the chat, but I'm going to say it hello now just because, it's all good. So the Duke, how's it going? Yeah, human history is about winners and losers. Oh, the smart people understand that. Okay. We're going to get all into that. I promise. Chatting off podcast. How's it going? Evening. Southwood Blue. Yep, I'm from Manchester. Hope it's good up there. Skittles, man, what's up? I know you can't stay long, so it's all good. Appreciate having you, Falcon Black. As always, what's up? If you are new, if you are listening back on the live, please hit that like button and please subscribe if you are new. Brenda, good evening. How are you? Hope you are doing well this evening or wherever you are around the world. I don't know. So yeah, I hope everyone is doing well. And yeah. Okay, fair enough then. I mean, I hope it's not like salmonella or something like that, because that I've heard, can be quite painful. So I hope hope you're getting better. Hope you are drinking the fluids and all that good stuff, and hope you're keeping well. So yeah, prayers, big ups to yourself, and hope you get better and recover from it. So first off, I just wanted to say, I've not been uploading as late because I've had a couple of personal issues. So I do want to apologize for not being able to upload. It's been a crazy month of September for me personally. So I've been going through the wars, I've been going through the trials and all that other good stuff. So that's why you've not been seeing me posting, or that's why you've not been seeing me do anything at all in regards to YouTube. I've just been laying low, sorting some stuff out and getting things on. But right now, I'm back. Things are starting to look up at least. So expect to see a lot more of me in terms of live streams, content. That's what I'm hoping. And what better month? What better month, people, than October? Now, for all of those who don't know, and if you don't know, then to be honest with you, you've not been paying attention. But October is Black History Month, and during this month is always, for me, it's always two things at the moment when I see things. It's always either a lot of oohing and ahhing, a lot of just controversy, or a lot of good things get discussed during this month. But this month in particular, again, I thought, why not try and get to my aim of getting to 1,000 subs? That's my aim. That's my goal for the end of this year, to get to 1K. And obviously, what good month it is to come back with some force in October, which is Black History Month. So I hope you guys are all ready. Hope you guys are all got your post notifications on, and we're going to get into it, because today's live stream, as you've seen the title of this live stream, it's a direct comment, which came from a message, which we're gonna get into in a second. We're gonna really get into it, which is called, it's called "I Do Not Care About Colonialism." Now, this has caused quite a bit of a stir, at least that I picked up on and thought, you know what, that's an excellent starter in terms of Black History Month as a total, as it starts, as we get into this month and as we really divulge into Black History Month. Because again, as always, when it comes to Black History Month, it's always, for me, it's like Marmite. It's like a lot of people either love it or they hate it. There doesn't seem to be, at least from my viewpoint, correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, about how you feel about this month. If you like it, you love it. If you don't, if you're not bothered. But for Black people, this is it now. It's not even like the other demographics that I kind of really care about. But for Black people, when it comes to this month, it seems to really, it triggers them. I don't know if it's just me. I don't know how you guys feel about this month at all as a whole, but it's either people love it or they hate it. And this is Black people now. This isn't anyone else I'm talking about. This is us. Us as a group of people. We seem to just have this instinctive bias either for or against it. And this sort of, I suppose, comment, what transpired with the MP, this encapsulates everything of what I'm talking about and what I want to get into today, because I have some opinions on this, and I've heard some opinions already expressed earlier in the chat. So for definite, I'll be definitely looking forward to your viewpoints. So before I get into it, so Vincent, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. But I've been watching a few content. Again, this is from Black people now. And again, it's just, and it seems to come from a certain segment of Black people, which again, I'm going to get into. I don't want to get into it now because that's part of the show, but it just, a certain segment of Black people seem to really sneer their nose at Black History Month. And again, I want to know why. I'm hearing other people say different things. Someone said they're indifferent to Black History Month. Okay, cool. Fair enough then. I appreciate that. Personally, I don't care for Black history. I'm assuming, Vincent, you mean Black History Month, not Black history as what you've put in the comments. But even if you do, okay, fair enough then. But whenever I hear this notion about I don't care about this Black History Month or all this kind of stuff, I'm like this. Maybe it's just me and my upbringing. Maybe it's just how I was raised, or maybe because I actually I like it. As more and more I'm getting older, maybe this may be an age thing, I don't know, but I actually like Black History Month because there are a lot of things which I had absolutely no clue about. Now, a lot of it I will say, or say some of it is down to my ignorance. Don't get me wrong. In this day and age of information is readily available. You can download books, good books for a cheap price, whether it be ebooks, actual books itself, the physical copy, depending on what you like. So I do agree, and a lot of that in me is down to my own ignorance, because again, unless you don't seek out the information, you're not going to know the information. However, some of that, a lot of it is down to, guess what? Where I was born, where I was raised, and therefore what history was impressed upon me. Again, I don't know if you noticed, but in the UK, this is a white dominated society. We're in Europe. So history taught by the Brits and European will have a Eurocentric viewpoint. So me as a child, I grew up knowing a lot more Eurocentric viewpoints. That's just a courtesy of, guess what? Where I was born, where I was raised. So whenever Black history got interjected into that, it was always some sort of connotation which necessarily wasn't the most best. It wasn't the most positive. It was always a kind of a negative connotation, which is why I kind of understand why people sort of have this, especially Black folk, have this very, very fervent opposition to Black History Month. But as I've gotten older, and as I've learned more and more and more about myself, just as a human being, as a man, as I've gotten older, it's made me seek out history more, my history more, just because I want to know where I'm from. I want to know exactly how to trace my line. And that's kind of where I see things when it comes to Black History Month as a whole. I think if you've caught me when I was younger, I probably would have been like, I don't care about this nonsense. I don't care about this BS. But as I'm getting older, there are a lot of information which are just, for me, it just clues in some of the missing pieces, the missing jigsaw puzzle. Not everything, of course, because it's impossible, but it's just a situation where, for me, I just learned so much. Now, again, people are saying, oh, Black History Month is every month, but come on, we know that's bullshit. We know that every month people don't care about Black history. We know every month people don't care about history in general. And again, we're going to get into all this, I call it gaslighting. We're going to get in all this gaslighting that goes on to detract people from Black History Month. But again, I'm interested in your opinion. I value your opinion very much. So by all means, let me know what you think about Black History Month. But Kemi Badenoch, this girl, of all the MPs, the Black MPs on the Tory side, Kemi Badenoch, she seems to can't stay out of the news. Now, I have to caveat this point because it's not as if it was her doing. So for those who don't know, there was a leaked WhatsApp message from a group that she's a part of. And some messages were shared about colonialism and all that kind of other stuff because, wow, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna read the article and we're gonna find out exactly how it got leaked. But it got leaked. So it's not as if Kemi Badenoch stood on no podium. It's not like she said this and that, declaring to Black people during Black History Month, I don't care about this, I don't care about that. So I just want to make sure that's crystal clear before I read this article, that how it came from was nothing to do about her. It was a private chat that was leaked. So just before we get into it, I just want to say that's exactly what it is. But I'm just going to read this article. I'm going to share this article so you can all see it from the Vice. I'm just going to get into it. I'm hopefully not going to spend too long on this article, but I'm going to pause it at certain points just for things which I think are important or things which I think we need to key in on. But let's get into it then. So I'm just going to share my screen. Right. So this is taken from the Vice. So this is who broke the story. This is who got the actual leaked messages. And this is, again, title of the live stream. Live stream. I don't care about colonialism. Read UK Equalities Ministers leaked WhatsApp. So this was leaked WhatsApp. This is not something which she stood on no podium. This is nothing that she said at so keynote speech. Nothing like that took place. So again, this was leaked. So in a series of WhatsApp messages obtained by Vice World News, Kemi Badenoch dismissed the impact of colonialism and mocked black public figures in the UK. So UK Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch claimed, I don't care about colonialism in WhatsApp conversations, yada, yada, yada. In a series of messages and conversations reviewed in full by Vice World News, the rising star of the ruling Conservative Party, who have just been promoted to take on an expanded foreign affairs role. And that's very interesting because it's been a massive, if anyone who's not been aware of what's taking place, there's been a massive reshuffle that's taken place where a lot of people have been demoted from roles, promoted to roles, and she has been the beneficiary of being promoted. She's taken on extra roles. So while she's also been the minister for and secretary for equalities, now she's taken on an expanded foreign affairs role. Now, again, people, depending on how you feel about it, will take this as a kind of that word token or sellout in terms of, selling out the right people to get the roles that she gets to. Because you think to yourself, someone who can say I don't care about colonialism, yet is taking on a role in foreign affairs, it seems a little bit, it don't seem to be the right fit. Anyway, I digress. Let's continue. So, wrote that European powers just made a different bunch of winners and losers on the African continent. The disclosure of the WhatsApp comes days after Vice World News revealed that Badenoch had mocked LGBTQ rights in a leaked audio recording from 2018. The same year, some of the WhatsApp messages were written. Okay, so this was back to 2018, so quite a long time ago. There's another thing I hate about this situation now that goes on in the news with cancel culture and everything like that at all. People get your tweets, your messages, things that took place years and years ago. I know this was only a few years ago, so it's not like it's that long, but it's just the premise of people just, it doesn't matter what you say. And I'm going to say this, be careful about what you say. I'm telling you, because you never know what position you might hold later in life, especially those who are more aspirational than others. And before you know it, you're going to have a comment. It may be an offhand comment or a private conversation like this, which gets out in the press. And before you know it, your image, your tarnish, your reputation, everything that you worked your butt off to achieve evaporated just like that in a series of leaked messages, which again, has to be some privacy laws or whatever. But anyway, let's go. So be careful. You have to make sure you are extremely careful, or you just have to understand you have to fall on that sword. And if you said it, you're gonna have to either apologize. People make you do apologize, or fall on that sword and say, I said it, I meant it, is what it is. And that's what Kemi Badenoch, I gotta give her prop. She does seem to stand on her sword, stand on her square. So it reads, I don't care about colonialism because I know what we were doing before colonialism got there. And I'm just gonna stop right there because this is something that's very key now, which is something I wanted to really discuss. Because the narrative, whenever we talk about this topic, has always been in a situation of evil European powers, innocent, good, to do nothing Africans on the continent who are minding their own business, doing nothing. That's always the case. However, Kemi Badenoch here seems to have a different viewpoint in which beforehand that was not quite the case. Things weren't as black and white, pun intended, as they make it out to be. And as you said here, it wasn't the case of, it was just a case of what we're doing beforehand. They came in and made a different bunch of winners and losers. So it seems as if there was still some sort of, obviously not, they didn't call it colonialism, but there was still some sort of power struggle that was taking place. Or what this did was change the power structure. That's all it was. There was never any concept of rights. And it continues, the power struggle. So the people who lost out were old elites, not everyday people, she continued. The British Empire and its European counterparts believed in the superiority of white people, and indigenous groups experienced extreme exclusion, displacement, and violence in order for the British to take control and keep it. While there are debates around teaching this history in UK schools, the effects of colonialism continue today, and lives are still lost because of the colonial era laws. UK opposition party Labour called Badenoch's comments crass, divisive, and painfully inaccurate. As always, that's what the Labour will do. Fair enough. A UK government spokesperson said the government does not comment on leaked private correspondence. The WhatsApp message from Badenoch was sent privately or posted in a group chat called Conservative Friends of Nigeria. One of the founding members of the group was Femi Adebayo, a former associate and Conservative supporter. Now, I'm just going to stop right here, little side note, because what this also shows is you have to be careful about, again, who you are talking to, because I assume that the people in the WhatsApp group kind of knew each other. They got along. Again, she was one of the founding members of the group as well. I mean, think about it. One of the founding members of the group chat, a former associate And also, she's part of the same party. She's I say she's a conservative supporter. I don't know if she is now. And yet and still, she is the one who basically betrayed her friend, you could argue, or betrayed her associate, betrayed her by leaking information. And I can imagine she didn't tell Kemi that she was going to do it. She just did it because she thought she must have been triggered. She must have been upset. I don't know what it was, but she must have been triggered to a point where she thought, you know what? F this, I'm going to leak this information. So I'm saying to you, be careful about who you associate with as well. Not just what you say, but who you say it to in the form of post, text, and obviously, of course, comments. But of course, comments, you can't necessarily corroborate unless someone else is there. Whereas these messages, they're here for the world to see. And obviously, you can interpret it as you wish. But that just makes me laugh. I'm like, geez, this wasn't no white person who leaked this. This wasn't no white person. This was a black woman who leaked it against another black woman. So just want to put that out there as a sidebar. It continues. Adebayo said she provided the WhatsApp message to Vice World News because she felt she had to speak up. Wow. After Badenoch had a portfolio from the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office added to her brief. So this screams of jealousy. Think about this. This was posted in 2018, as per the article says. And because Kemi Badenoch was promoted, in which her brief was expanded to the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, she felt she had to speak up. She felt she had to just basically, you could say, betray her friend. I'm just like, it's crazy. That screams of jealousy. That screams of envy. That screams of, I don't like where you are now. She may have been, I can't remember where she was in 2018. She might have been just a normal MP, a backbencher. But now, of course, she's in the news. She's heavy involved in a lot of things that was going on in the front office, etc. And now it's a case of, I'm going to try and destroy. That's what it seems like to me. Again, I don't know. I could be wrong. She could have our best interest at heart. I don't know, but it doesn't seem that way. So the exact responsibilities of the minister's new international role are still to be confirmed. Adebayo was an investment banker when they first met Badenoch and looked up to the newly elected Conservative MP, one of the few black women in the UK's ruling party. Interesting. And this is how you betray her, or this is how you thank her. In an interview with Vice World News, Adebayo called Badenoch's comments on colonialism dangerous and ignorant. These messages show Kemi Badenoch's deep lack of understanding and ignorance when it comes to the impact of British colonialism, especially on the Commonwealth nations. In another message sent as part of the same conversation, Badenoch defended her beliefs around race, describing a mini identity crisis that she had in the mid-20s. Now, this is something I'm just going to get another sidebar. This is something which I do believe a lot of black people do experience, just in general, in regards to their identity. And again, this, you could argue it's a trait of, people call it colonialism, white supremacy, all that kind of other stuff. But I do think majority, when I mean majority, I'm going to say upwards of 75% of black people suffer a identity crisis. Now, it could range from a mini one to a severe full blown out one where it manifests into depression, which you get sectioned. And we've all seen the stats on black people and getting sectioned. It's heavily weighted in terms of black people, in terms of section under the Mental Health Act. So just wanted to point that out there. She discusses how she learned more about her race from someone who she believes would just be sacked for racism today. She said she had a colleague who took her to prison on the issue, and he was very aggressive in challenging my view of what African achievement actually was. She continued, the kind of chat I think is impossible to have today because he would have been sacked just for racism, or he would just be sacked for racism. But he knew his stuff and he didn't back down. And I found I knew a lot less about the country I lived in and grew up from what I thought. In the linked messages, Badenoch also criticized a number of leading black politicians in the UK, including those within her own party, as well as prominent black academics and public figures. Again, we'll talk about colonialism now. Everything else is getting exposed. Asked whether she considered Tory MP and Government Minister Sam Gyimah a potential leader of the party, Badenoch responded with the words, F no. He has no friends or base in the party. She continued, who is going to follow him. Gyimah, who quit the Conservative Party over UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Brexit plans and later joined the Liberal Democrats, has been contacted for comment. At one point, Badenoch boasted about almost making one of the world's most celebrated race academics cry in front of an audience. And again, this is obviously to smear a character. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I'm going to talk about what I think about Kemi Badenoch and people of that kind of ilk. Just because there is something in this article, which is why I'm continuing reading this, which for me just strikes clear as day, which I'm seeing a lot of, which I don't like. So I'm going to get into that later on, but I want to continue with this because I just want to sort of give you the full article so you know exactly where I'm coming from, so you know exactly why I'm saying what I'm saying. Of course, this is all my opinion, so I don't know her personally. So again, it is what it is. It continues. I was on a panel with Kimberly Crenshaw, who's like the queen of critical race theory at UCLA or Stanford, she wrote. She was practically in tears by the end of it because she literally had never heard the arguments I was making and could not respond. And then she started shouting that I had no right to be on the panel because I haven't read her book. Laughing emoji. Vice World News has contacted Kimberly Crenshaw for comment. After a prominent black columnist working for a major UK newspaper questioned how the black people could stand, yeah. Again, this is another character sort of situation we're going to talk about. So, after a prominent black columnist worked for a major UK newspaper questioned how black citizens could stand by their party after the Windrush scandal, where UK authorities wrongly threatened people born in the Caribbean country with deportation, or in some cases actually wrongly deported them, Badenoch responded, wow, she needs some schooling, and said she wants to build an army because she's tired of this shit. Badenoch added that it was very hard for her to speak up about the situation without getting abusive. She went on to ask the group, if I help you write an article, would you be happy to put your name to it? Badenoch also said that there were too many inarticulate black people given front and center stage. Now, I can't lie here. She ain't lying too much, is she? I mean, look at Diane Abbott. She continued the next message. Practically the only black woman you see discussing politics and how she disgraced herself, not knowing her brief. This kind of stuff is so bad for us. Labour MP Abbott, who at the time Badenoch's comments were Shadow Home Secretary, has been contacted for comment. So I'm going to stop right there just because I think that's everything I wanted to share when it comes to this article. And hopefully you've all got the gist of it. It continues on in regards to talking about the British Empire and how obviously people have called out Kemi Badenoch's comments in terms of being crass. It's not historically accurate. It's these things of that nature at all. And one thing I'm going to say here, and this is what kind of I was interested by her comments, because one thing which always intrigues me again is she said, I don't care about it because according to her, the powers that be beforehand, they were doing all this kind of other stuff which European powers just pretty much adopted and took on for themselves. I'm like, all right, cool. But sometimes to say that you don't care about colonialism, I don't understand that myself, because let's just be honest right now. Let's just be honest. You cannot deny the impact that colonialism has had on the African continent, as well as the diaspora, both, again, worldwide diaspora and on the continent. There's no way near you can ever deny the massive impact that this has had on us as a people, surely. So I'm kind of surprised, but then again, I'm like, am I really surprised? Not really, and I'm going to get into as to why I'm not surprised, because there's a reason why practically every African nation, particularly in the West Africa, Southern Africa, Northern Africa, down near every African nation, but I think one or two, speaks a European tongue, whether it be English, French, Portuguese, Spanish. Why do you think that was? Well, it wasn't because you guys decided to learn English. It wasn't because you guys decided to learn Spanish. It wasn't because you guys decided to learn French. It was because, guess what? The powers that be at that time, either be the result of colonialism or slavery, take your pick. They decided it was best it would be that, guess what? You need to learn our tongue. Why? It was a language of trade, business, whatever happened. But essentially, you lost the war. You lost the battle. You were taken over by another group, a superior group, in which either some were sent over to, again, the Caribbean and the New World, as they called it, and some stayed on the continent. But still, you were still under another man's rule. You didn't have your rule. You had someone else's rule. And we can see clear impact. Clear impact. Now, I have to be fair and balanced here, because at the end of the day, again, some of it is positive. And again, depending on what you believe, and this is it now, depending on what you believe, there's two things that I've heard, and they're contrasting so much from black people. You have one group of people who say, before Europeans got here, Africa was just this paradise. There was no war, no diseases, no jails. Everyone was living in perfect harmony until the Europeans got here. And then when the Europeans got here, they obviously enslaved a lot of us, took us over. They divided us. That's the reason why the nations are as divided as it is now. All this kind of other stuff. It's all because of that point in time, or I should say, that history that took place 400 odd years ago, which continues up until the independence that took place. A lot of them in the 60s, some later on in the 80s. But that was all the direct result of, guess what? European powers. Now, that's one school of thought that I've heard, again, from black scholars, black leaders, black academics. And then I have another thought, another viewpoint from another group of people who says, before Europeans got there, Africans weren't doing anything. Africans weren't building, as people were claiming. African civilization weren't on the level of European civilization, Eastern Asian civilization. They were nowhere near on that level. Africans couldn't even basically build fire until Europeans showed them how to build fire, steel, set up civilization, democracy, governments, all these things. was the direct benefit, particularly of the British Empire now. Because when you're at school and you learn about the British Empire, you learn about all the, the classic line is the sun never shine on the British Empire. That was a classic line. Another reason why. Because guess what? They had empires amassing the whole world. It was the greatest ever empire that ever existed. And throughout humankind, there will never in history be an empire like the British Empire. Never. No empire comes close. Not even the Roman Empire that preceded it. Not even this New World Age empire with the West. The British Empire has statistically been the greatest empire that ever ruled this earth. And guess why? It had all these colonial powers all across the world. So I don't know how you can really, really say with a straight face, or text with a straight face, message with a straight face, that you don't care about colonialism. Now, I understand the context of I don't care about it today, but damn, I'm like this. There is no way near, particularly when it comes to us as a group of people. I don't care what anyone says, that you cannot, when it comes to history, look at us and say this has to be tackled or this has to be taught. It's a huge, huge part of our history, whether we like it or not. And again, maybe it's because I feel it differently because of my background. Again, for me, in order for my background to be fully traced, I have to do a DNA test in order to trace my heritage, my ancestry. I can only trace back my root or my line back to a certain situation. I can't trace it back. I want to say a few generations. I can't exactly quite say, but I have to go through all the avenues. So there's no way near that my story does not involve some unfortunate situation that involves the words, yes, that's right, slavery, or again, in this word, colonization. So I'm just like this. It's interesting to me. Let's just say that as to why she, of all people, because if she's as intelligent as she thinks she is, if she's as articulate as she thinks she is, then surely she would understand the impact, particularly on the Commonwealth nations, again, that she was once a part of before independence or what, but even still, in particular, the Commonwealth nations, surely you should understand the importance that it has in Black people's lives, because it is a massive, massive, massive point in our history. That's just a fact. There's no way near getting around it, whether you like it or not, whether you like the narrative or not, that's fine. But I'm just like this. There's no way near you can tell our history without going through it. There's no way near. There's only a certain point you can go to where, like, you know what, we're going to have to tackle it. We're going to have to do it. Slavery, colonization, we're going to have to tackle it. It is what it is. So I'm always a bit interested in the article, how she's pretty much brushing it off, talking about she don't care about this, all this kind of, I'm like, I don't get it. And I understand why the founder, Adebayo, was like, you know what? I don't agree that she leaked it. I do not agree that she leaked it to the Vice News, but I understand that she was concerned because she's now taking on foreign affairs. And a lot of things with foreign affairs, particularly African nations, that they're talking about, I don't know, colonial, post-colonial laws, i.e. trade wars, and all these things are legacies of what took place under colonial eras when it comes to, again, the trade, how when you see all these European powers, how they set up shop, all these things are legacies, how certain businesses in Africa are British businesses because of, guess what? Post-colonial era, it's still there to this day. So there's still some things which when I spoke to some people who, again, lived in Kenya and all that kind of other stuff, they're saying how many British companies that they are. And again, it's all because of, guess what? That's right, colonialism. Now, whether we like it or not, whether we want to talk about it or not, it's just a fact. There's no getting around it. So I was a bit surprised. I was a bit like, really? That's your take on it? That's what you're going to say? But again, I don't know if it's just because, again, she has a different viewpoint as whether she cares for it in her life. Because at the end of the day, you're right. Going forward, we want to move forward. We don't want to look to the past. But even still, I'm going to temper that comment a little bit, because that is something which is part of the gaslighting that I hear a lot from Black folk, and I hear a lot from people, particularly on the right. I'm hearing a lot from Black folk about the right, about how, and someone made a comment about this, and I wanted to sort of bring it up. I'm just going to look at the comment about Black History Month should be talking about STEM subjects, and we should talk about this and all that other kind of stuff. And I'm like, all right, cool. I get you. But the problem is, and this is the problem, history is exactly that. History. Now, what I find so interesting, and this is why I never understand why Black people have this viewpoint when it comes to our history, is I hear Black people basically listen to white people talking about, oh, you shouldn't be talking about that. Oh, you shouldn't care about that. Oh, you should be moving on. You should move past it. I'm thinking to myself, are you flipping high? Are you high? Do you know, in school, correct me if I'm wrong now, all those who were in school, particularly those, millennial age, I was forced to study a subject up until about year 9 when I took my options called history. There was an actual class dedicated to something called history. I don't know if anyone knows this. I don't know if anyone was in the same, had the same kind of schooling, the same kind of curriculum, but there is a dedicated class in which you study, you take exams on. It's called history. Guess what that's about? You don't want to know what that's about. Anyone want to know? It's the key, the clue is in the title. They talk only about history. Now, again, we're in the UK. We only know about British history. So guess what they're going to want to know? Guess what they teach us? Guess what they teach their children? Guess what they teach their people? They teach their people their wars, their victories, their conquests. And don't get me, and here's the thing. It goes thousands years. Dark Ages, the medieval period, Henry VIII, the Renaissance period. They talk about the Roman Empire, the British Empire. They care about their history, all of the history that they can trace back. So I always find it so interesting how Black people seem to get that, try and gaslight other Black people. They try and talk to other Black people about, oh, we shouldn't be talking about history. We shouldn't be talking about this. We shouldn't be I'm like, are you high? That is such a trick. And I used to be on that camp. I used to be on that boat. I'm not going to lie to you. But when I opened my eyes and realized, are you serious? Are you absolutely serious? Every culture, every ethnicity prides themselves on their history. There's a reason why white people right now, the major demographics are revolting back on some of the things that have been taught, because they do not like their history being transformed. They do not like their history being tarnished in front of their eyes. Why? Because they have a pride in their history. My question to you guys is, why don't you? Now, of course, it's not a great set of history that we talk about. I agree. I absolutely agree. It's not a prideful thing that these things get talked about. But I'm like this. Okay. But history, unfortunately, for us in a lot of cases, it has been about slavery and colonialism. Now, we have history before that, which, again, I'm happy to learn, and I've been learning. But I'm like this. It's just madness how we get gaslit about, oh, we shouldn't be learning about this, or oh, we don't care about this, all that kind of other stuff. And yes, Chat Enough Podcast, you're 100% correct. History, his story. History is taught by who? The winner. History is taught by the victor. History has always been taught by the people who have the gun. Again, if history was taught by not the poacher, but by the lion or the elephant or whoever was basically killed, I bet it would have a completely different story than, guess what, the person who won. It's just a fact of life. But this is what kind of kills me the most, because they will tell their history according to their perspective. Cool, I have no problem with that. So why is it that we can't teach our history according to our perspective? That's all I'm saying. That's why I really get kind of, I won't say, I get a bit triggered when I hear this kind of stuff. I'm like, why would you, as a Black person, not want to hear about your history? Now, again, we could talk about what we want to learn about our history. I have no problem with that. If you don't care about this particular part of it, okay, cool, I get it. But it's not even that. It's about any bit of history that I hear. It's like, oh, here we go again. Oh, here we go again. Oh, here we go again. I'm like, are you serious? Are you high? But this is exactly what takes place. Now the dude, you put something very key. And this is what I was going to say about Kemi Badenoch, which is why I'm going to say this. You say which Black people I know my African history, but I won't expect British schools to teach me my history. Okay, cool. Now that's for you. Now, you have a African heritage. Well, you're obviously Black, British born, African heritage. Whereas maybe this is why, for me, from a Caribbean perspective, I have a different viewpoint, because I didn't know anything about African history growing up. Not only did I not know that, but even back in the Caribbean, and I'm going to speak to some elders to get some clarity on this. But for the Caribbean now, because we were enslaved, this could be the difference now. Our history was taught from a British perspective. You see, in the Caribbean, when our ancestors came over here during the Windrush generation, guess what they called this country? They called it the mother country. You know the reason why? Because they were taught that this was their mother country. Now, anyone with a lick of brains would think, how can a white nation be the mother country to a group of dark people? I tell you why. Because they were taught a different set of history, which, guess what, unfortunately, was not to do with African history. So this is where I'm going to say this. I think Kemi Badenoch, because she's Nigerian, she has a different set of branches. Fair enough. But that's not the story for all of us here. And this is where I think some of the disconnect comes between what she's saying and sometimes how I feel about the situation, because there are a lot of things which we were never taught. Even when it comes to names, going back to the Caribbean, a lot of Caribbean names, if you notice, particularly old school yardie names, were what? Winston, Leroy, Delroy, all them kind of names. Anyone know what those names are? They are British names. They aren't Black names. Now, we stereotypically call, especially back in the day, a Black person, Winston, Leroy, Everton, all these kind of names here were typical Black names back in the day, but they weren't. They aren't. They're white names. They are historically white names. So Winston Churchill, that's why Winston was so popular. These were British history that was taken. And this is what I mean when I say there's a reason why history is so important, because this is why, again, the Caribbean, a lot of West Indians, this is why they looked up to the British Empire. Why? Because they were taught from a British standpoint. They didn't learn about all this, African history in which they could really be prideful. That came later after independence. So I believe the new school Caribbeans, they have a different viewpoint. But the old school Caribbeans, where again, during the Windrush generation, they had a completely different setup. So there's so much history, so much things that were just missed, because guess what? During the era of slavery, they weren't taught this kind of stuff. Why would they? They weren't going to teach you history. They weren't going to teach us our history. They're going to teach us their history, because that means you're going to fall in love with the oppressor. This is the Stockholm syndrome. This is why I'm just like, when it comes to these situations, it seems as if people like that have a disconnect between what other people see and what their experiences with is, because they know what their history is. They know what their time is. They know exactly what they, again, and keep in mind now, their history is taught to by an African perspective. I guarantee if you get a Brit to talk about African history from their perspective, you maybe have a completely different viewpoint. But you know why you don't care? Because you're solidified in the fact of, you know what your history is. That's kind of what I want. That's the difference. And you're right. The surnames, classic surnames. My surname, you won't be able, you could tell I'm an African. You wouldn't be able to tell I'm black by my surname. Look, Campbell, Mackenzie, Brown, Edwards, Smith, Jones, Irish, Welsh name. All these names are historical legacies that not only does it reek of colonialism and slavery, but it reeks of everything to do with the European powers, whether we like it or not. Our name symbolizes exactly where we come from. Again, and when you trace it back, it's not to a black family, it's to a white family. This is why I when it comes to, I don't care about this colonialism, I had all this kind of other stuff. I'm like this, come on. It's just kind of crazy to me how, and it screams of, I'm going to say it now, particularly when it comes to conservatives, elitism and classism. There seems to be quite a bit of an elitism that goes on, in which, because you may have more, you may have, I know this, it seems to be the case of, because I'm in this position, why can't you be here? Now, I get why that's the case, but it just screams of, because I know this, because I was brought up in this way, because of this kind of stuff. It's like, what the hell? Does everyone else have your same experience? No. Does everyone else have your same viewpoints? No. And it screams a lot of, when I see her and when I do a bit of research on her background, but not only her, but other Tory MPs who are black, because Tories in the UK have always derided, because they're always, seen as elitist. They're always seen as being very for the rich, for a certain demographic. They never care about the everyday person, the average person, the working class, the working stiff. They always have that tag. And sometimes even in her comments, where she would just say, it was just a brush off comment, where I'm just like, it screams a lot of, and I see this a lot with conservative black ones, where some of them have middle class backgrounds, and it's not their fault, it is what it is, but it just screams of, because I have something, because I have this, because I did this, this is what it is. It's another form of tribalism. It's another form of separation. And it's another form that I hear happens a lot on the continent, where it's just elite blacks ruling over non-elite blacks. And it's just the same situation when it comes to education and this viewpoint. That's how it just seems like to me. And Vincent, you put a comment on there about, I don't mean to sound ignorant, but correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't there Caribbean history, something like that? I mean, Black Americans have their own history. Yes, we do. Absolutely. But again, you have to understand, independence took place for a lot of Caribbeans, in the 60s. So that's not long. That's like a couple of generations ago, if that, depending on how old your grandparents are. But again, even for me, myself, and again, any other Caribbeans who are in the chat, UK Caribbeans, correct me if I'm wrong, the history that we taught wasn't in the same vein as like Black American history. There's certain things which we got taught about, but again, it's rooted, Vincent, in, again, slavery, conquest. It's rooted in a lot of those types of things. So this is where, again, it goes back to the whole colonialism, and it's the whole tired-old argument of slavery. Unfortunately, it just is what it is. So when I was growing up, there was a bit of history that was taught, but again, it's always from a Eurocentric viewpoint. Again, going back to what I said about why a lot of our first names were British first names. They did that purely because they looked up to British heroes. They saw them as heroes. And he thinks of, how does a person who enslaved you, colonized you, conquered you, be your hero? But this is how it was back in those days. This was the whole, how we divide and conquer. This is why it is what it is. So when it comes to the history like that, that's the difference. That's the disconnect. It's not that we don't have history, just how it was taught. And even now, we're still trying to uncover things. I'm just like, man alive. There's some things we were not taught. Again, I'm in the UK, so that's what it is. But there's some things which I believe a lot of the younger Caribbeans, I have to ask them exactly how they're being taught in the Caribbean. But again, the old school people, I'm telling you, there's a lot of things which they did not know. And it's not their fault. They just weren't taught. And the thing is, how is that possible that people thinking, how you didn't know that? Well, if you don't speak your native tongue, number one, how are you going to know you don't have a connection to your homeland? If they split you up, you got no connection. So you're rebuilding yourself. So that's how it takes place. And that's kind of the difference when it comes to that sort of thing, Vincent. So that's what I say today. And but going back to this whole, again, elitism thing, this classism thing, because it always seems to be, again, I don't know what it is. I'm not saying it's all of them, but well-to-do blacks, they seem to have this diversion. They seem to have this almost, it feels as if inbuilt hatred when it comes to talking about black issues. It's always on the side of, oh, stop talking about it. Or we don't want to hear about that nonsense. We don't hear about that kind of stuff. And I get it. Some things we do need correction on. I agree with that. But I'm just like, it just screams of elitism, classism. It just screams of, listen, because I've made it here. And this is where the classic line of be called a sellout, a mercenary comes. Just because they are where they are, because again, a lot of them have middle-class background. When I listen to like Kelvin Robinson, how they speak, even Kemi Badenoch, how she speaks, when I listen to how they all sound, and there's another guy, I think his name's Ben Afemi or something like that. And I'm like, bro, again, it's not their fault. They were born where they are where they are, but they all seem to have that exact same type of background, that class system. And it just creates a whole new system where, for me, it emboldens white supremacists. So whenever I see on the news Good Morning Britain, or whenever I see them come up, it's always in opposition to black people. It's like, why is it that sometimes you just can't take the knee on this? I mean it. Sometimes there's certain topics I'm like this. Look, I may have my different viewpoints, but sometimes it may be good just to be silent. It may just be good to be, just to be quiet and silent. I don't know what it is, but for some odd reason, this is where the term sellout comes, mercenary. This is where all that other stuff comes into place. Because again, whenever it seems to be, white people are getting attacked about their history, because it obviously it is a violent past for some of it. Let's be honest. Here they come, front line and center. Here they come, just trying to defend white daddy. I'm like, come on now, just take a knee for a second. Just take a knee. I'm like this. It's not like I don't say we don't want to hear black conservatives. That's not what I'm trying to say. But don't you find it, the Duke, that it's always in opposition to other black thought? It's always reactive, never proactive. It's always in the case of the left will have what we need to do. The right will say, we don't need that because we don't care about that. We don't need that. We don't care about that. We don't need that because, our history ain't about this. But they're not saying to us, we need to have a supplementary school that teaches the black history. They're always in opposition. That's what I mean when it comes to black conservatives. I don't know if anyone have seen that. I don't know if anyone, but it's always a case of black conservatives. They really, when it comes to black issues, it's always in opposition to black folk. It's never in some sort of, let's actually be proactive and say, what can we do here to enlighten black people? Because we have a different viewpoint. This is what it looks like. It's always a case of, no, we don't want that. 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 It's always like, that's what it seems like. It's always, they're contrarians. That's what I call them. They want to call themselves free thinkers. They want to call themselves this, but all it comes across as, you're just being contrary for the sake of being contrary. And that's how it comes across. Again, I could be wrong. I'm definitely going to open the chat to have your viewpoint, open the panel to have your viewpoints. I don't want to labor too long tonight, but I just wanted, this is exactly what when I saw this sort of comment and when I saw what was transpiring, it screams to me of all these things. Like, do you know what? There needs to be a reset in our mindset of how we teach our kids history. I agree with that. I agree that it shouldn't always be about slavery. It shouldn't always be about colonialism. I agree with that. But then I'm like this, isn't it funny how when it comes to other groups, there are certain key points in history that they never forget. This is another thing what kills me. Another thing I wanted to raise. There are certain groups that we know about. Jews, for example. Do you really think you can tell the Jews, do you know what? Your history is more than the Holocaust. Do you know that? You know, the Holocaust was only from 1939 to 1945. That was, in the scheme of things, 6 years. So 6 years. And that determines what? How many thousand years that the Jews have been on this planet Earth. Do you think anyone's bold enough to tell them to forget 6 years, as opposed to, depending on what you believe now, either 6,000 years or how many millions of years? Do you think anyone's bold enough to say that shit? Now, here's the thing. If someone is bold enough to say that, guess what happens? Anyone know what happens when that takes place? I tell you what happens. They come on them like the ton of bricks. You heard of cancel culture. You remember Wiley, right? Earlier, was it this year or last year? I did a video on this where Wiley was tweeting about the Jews and talking about the Holocaust and all this kind of other stuff. And it came across as what? They called it anti-Semitism. Now, for all I know, what Wiley said had some actual historical fact. For all I know, what Wiley was talking about was something that actually took place during that time. But do you think Jews actually gave a damn? No, they didn't. Know the reason why? Because the accepted narrative is what? That period of time is so pivotal in their history that not only will they not forget it, I'm telling you now, because Jews control the media, I'm telling you, you go research how many World War II or Nazi type Jew films they are that's been created since the event took place. I'm telling you, there are hundreds of films. I mean, some of them are great films, by the way. I do watch it, but you see what I'm trying to say when I say this becomes the gaslighting that Black people ourselves have absolutely taken on board. They will never forget their history. Again, only 6 years, but it's a tragedy. Do not get me wrong. It's a tragedy. But why is the reason? Because to them, to that group, that point of time is so pivotal. As to why, I do not know. That's up for that group to decide. But here's my problem with us. When it comes to our pivotal moment, which lasted, let's be honest, a hell of a lot longer than 6 years, we can at least agree to that, surely. So our history or our turmoil, our tragedy, our Holocaust, as people call it, the Black Holocaust, that's what it's colloquially known as, that lasted a hell of a lot longer than 6 years. But yet when it comes to this, we seem to have such division about not just the content of what took place, but even discussing it. I'm like, are we serious? Are you guys really serious? Are we actually discussing whether we shouldn't talk about it or not? We should never, ever, 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 ever forget. I'm not saying we should use it as a crutch. That's the difference. And that's where I would agree. And I would only go as far to say this. We should remember our history, but we shouldn't use it as a crutch. But as the famous saying goes, those who forget their history are doomed to repeat their history. There's a reason why other cultures, other groups, I mean, again, going back to when I was a youngster, what did I learn about? Battle of Hastings, Battle of Waterloo, Henry VIII. Now, did this have any relevance to my life today? No. But guess what? The powers that be, the main demographic, white people have said, this is a pivotal part in our time. Because guess what? There are key differences. The world itself changed, whether it be the world of Britain or the global world changed because of a singular event that took place. When it comes to Henry VIII and his role on the church, when it comes to how the split of the Catholic Church came about, when it be about the British Empire, when it be about the Industrial Revolution, which modernized the world. Listen, I always hate hearing, and this is just pure gaslighting I hear from our own people talking about we shouldn't talk about this. Are you high? For us, this changed it changed where us as a group of people reside today. There's a reason why we're in the Caribbean. There's a reason why we're in the US. There's a reason why we're in Latin America. There's a reason why we're in Brazil, Latin America, Southern America. There's a reason why we're in these places because of a pivotal event that took place. History is not for the faint-hearted. I get that. But I always get intrigued when I hear Black people talk about this stuff. I'm like, are you seriously? Are you high? It's like, why do you want to forget your history? Or why do you want to completely snare yourself at that history, but other history, that's completely fine. That's acceptable. I'm like, this is why I don't get on board with this nonsense that I keep hearing about from a lot of people. Again, it seems to be from the right. I have to keep it real. Who seems to just want to brush off history just because it doesn't look good on their, I don't know, their background, that they were colonized, that they're enslaved. All right, fine, cool, I got you. I'm like this again. Do you think it looked good on the background of Jews that they, how many millions of Jews were murdered, slaughtered? Do you think that looks good? But I guarantee they damn sure will not let you forget that. That's what I'm talking about. Germany itself, the actual perpetrators of this, of the massacre, I say Nazis, let's be fair. But in Germany, they have camps preserved. Why? Because they themselves, as the Mardi Gras, have reserved to say, look, this was a horrible part in our time. We're going to remember it. And if anyone's been to Auschwitz and all this kind of place in Poland and Germany, you will see these things. You will see history being preserved. So this is why, again, I kind of do a side note. I didn't agree with the removing of statues. I think we should preserve these statues, but just talk about it. Talk about it. That's all it is. Now, again, someone says they've got, and in regards to even how they commemorate it, we have so many days that we commemorate Remembrance Day for World War I, World War II victims, all these kind of things. Again, the poppies, all these things are signals or remembrances. All these are tropes, so people do not forget. There's a reason why people say don't forget, because Once you forget the names, you forget what took place. I mean, even now people talk about, oh, well, white people move on, they do this, they don't hold grudges, because this is the next thing. This is part of the gaslighting now. The problem is, as well, I keep hearing, is because black people hold grudges against white people for something that took place a long time ago. All right, cool. But I'm like this. There's a reason why Germany and England have such a rivalry. There's a reason why France and England have such a, let's just say, a distrust of each other. There's a reason why these European nations, while they may be, be able to do business with each other, don't get me wrong, there's still that legacy in regards to France, and how, obviously, if anyone knows anything about history, how you had or the kings who presided over France, over Spain. Again, obviously Germany, the Nazis, the World War I, World War II. There's a reason why these groups have these stereotypes about them. It doesn't mean that they don't do business, don't get me wrong, but that's because they remember their history. And guess what it triggers? Certain emotions. No one is any different. So when I always hear this stuff from black folks saying, oh, we don't care about this, or oh, we don't care about that, I'm like, dude, it just kind of kills me the most, because every group does the exact same thing. But why are you deriding your own selves for doing the exact same thing that other groups do? All what you're doing is taking back control of your history. And that's where I'm going to say this, and that's what I think we mess up at. Because if I say this month in particular, which we should do better at, is this: I don't care about what other groups have to say about what our history is all about. I don't care. I think we should have something which ourselves care about, and we don't even let anyone else know about. Especially when it comes to our history. Now, growing up, you had things like, growing up, I had like supplementary schools that you could go to, or even the church was very good for this, in which, again, it was like a black church. So you see, obviously, black people talking about their experiences when they came over here and all that, basically their history. Now, I used to take it for granted when I was younger, but now I'm like, you know what? As I get older, I really appreciate it even more so. But I would rather have a situation where we ourselves as a group come together and only talk about ourselves. We don't need to involve everyone and their dog. We don't need to, create this big huff and fuss about, you need to do this for us, you need to do that for us. That's part of where I will agree. Other groups get pissed off, and I do sometimes, because I'm like, why do you care what other people say, number one? And why must you involve them in everything that you're doing, number two? Why is it that we can't, especially with the power of social media? For all the negatives that social media can bring and has brought, there are positives. You can fortify, or you can solidify, you can build a group up very quickly. You can connect with so many people all across, not just your city or your country, but the world, in which you can learn things in an instant. We all know what the pandemic has done for people who can work from home, and how we have the technologies that allow us to be able to connect, even kind of face to face, but you get it, on camera, which you can see people's face. There's so many things now that we can do, which wasn't available back in the day, which I understand why, because Black History Month was created way back in the 80s. It wasn't like it was created last week, according to some people at least. So I'm just like this. There's so many avenues now where I think we need to be best suited to say, you know what? Cool. Let's not worry about what they're saying. Let's not worry about that. Let's just come together as a group. And that's what we've been bad at for, I don't know how many years, how long, in terms of coming together. But that's what it needs to be. That's how I see it should take place going forward. We don't need to make this big song and dance about, white people or Asian people need to come on board and talk about. I don't agree with that sort of stuff. I think it's for us. Therefore, we should do it ourselves. We should be the beneficiary of that, because it's for us. We should do it ourselves. We have the power to do so. With modern technology, there is really now little to no excuse. But again, we are a group of excuses. I will have to agree with that. And I'm like, I don't know why, but it is what it is. We don't need to involve everyone else. We just need to educate ourselves. So I'm just like, it's just crazy. And Salford, you did say something which I agree with here, that we need to stop copying what the Americans do. I agree. And that's one thing which, again, part of the reason why is because, talking about history, Black history now, the history that I taught from a Black perspective wasn't a Black American history. It wasn't a Black UK history. I didn't learn about Marcus Garvey, Michael X, Darkest Howe, all them kind of people. I didn't learn about all these kind of things until I had to step away myself and learn it myself. So the reason why we do that is because we get indoctrinated with a lot of American, let's be honest, American TV, American history, American films as a general, even still when it comes to Black folk. So I'm just like, I agree with that, but that's probably the reason why we've been doing what we've been doing. And I agree, we know what we know. We can, again, the information's out there. There's so much things that we can learn. There's so much things that we can build upon. We need to make sure, because again, even some Black Brits, man, if I test them on their history, some basic things, they don't know it. I'm like, that's crazy to me. But it's not crazy, because guess what? They just weren't taught it. And whenever Black history was taught, it was always from an American viewpoint, as if Americans were the only Black people in the world during that time. And obviously it is what it is, but you see what I'm saying? So I 100% agree. We need to stop copying. But unfortunately, that's the reason why it seems that way, because we were not, again, because we weren't taught our own history. This is why I think a lot of us over here have an identity crisis, in my humble opinion. That's how I see it. So yeah, 100%. We need to build. We need to do what we need to do. Let's not worry about anybody else. Let's not care about what anyone else is doing. Let's just worry about ourselves. Let's just worry about exactly what we are absolutely doing. So that's exactly what I'm saying. But this is what I want to talk about when it comes to this topic of, and I'm going to do some more live streams about Black History Month. I'm going to do some more topics in which I'm going to be interested in. I want to hear your viewpoints. But I always get, I do get a little more triggered when I hear things about, oh, we shouldn't be worrying about this. Why do we need this? Why do we need that? There's a historical reason why, unfortunately, we of all people have needed certain interventions. It's not because, we're eternal victims. There is a situation where a lot of us, our legacies have been stripped away from us. And in order for us to know this, we have to go back far, far wide. And unfortunately, other groups have our information. I mean, if you ever go to like the British Museum, there's certain artifacts which I'm like, damn, white people keep shit. White people log shit down. And unfortunately, we don't have the history of a written history like white people do. Let's keep it real. So why white people, they keep things from goddamn Egyptian era in terms of pyramids that they chopped off the noses to? They keep things. They know their history because they care about their history. So when I hear this stuff about Black History Month as a whole and not care about colonialism and all this kind of stuff, I'm like, listen. History is important because, again, if you don't know your history, you are doomed to repeat your history. That's exactly how it comes across. And that's exactly it's why I just, when I hear this sort of comments, when I hear these tropes, I'm like, it always comes from a singular-minded viewpoint. Now, again, it's their viewpoint, it's their perspective. But when I look at my viewpoint, my perspective, I'm like, that is not the reason why. It is not the reason why I like Black History Month. It's not the reason why I think it needs to be here. Now, again, in terms of how it looks going forward, that's up for you guys to decide. I don't agree it should be some sort of Black History Month that everyone should be involved in. I believe we as a group of people should be able to mobilize at this late day and age with all the technology for ourselves to be able to control our narrative, so we can say to whoever people who says, this is your history, no, we know our history, therefore that's what history looks like. So I've opened up the chat. I've opened up the panel. Again, I don't want to spend too long, be fair to you, because I know how these panels can get. But I just wanted to open up and see if anyone has any viewpoints on this matter about, I suppose, Black History Month as October hits, and also about, do you care about colonialism? Is this a part of history which you care about? Is there something which you even like to hear about? Because that's what it screams of me, in which it's more about people don't want to hear about their defeats. It's more about people don't want to hear that they're eternal victims, which I get. But unfortunately, this is, at the moment, our biggest history so far, or our biggest recorded history, has been about, unfortunately, negativity, colonialism, and all that kind of be. Now, going forward, for sure, that's not going to be our message. That's not the message I want to portray. But when we look at history and a pivotal part of our history, again, like the Holocaust, like the Jews, that's exactly what they talk about. It's a heavy defeat, but you won't catch them. You won't catch them disrespect their own history like that. You won't catch it. If you do, it's called anti-Semitism. The Duke, welcome. How's it going?
What's up? How you doing, White Matters?
Yeah, all good, man. All good. So, so what are your thoughts on, I suppose, kind of two questions, but it's really one. So obviously the topic is I don't care about colonialism. I know you obviously in your chat you were kind of on Kemi Badenoch's side, and I suppose it kind of pertains to Black History Month. So what are your viewpoints on that?
Oh yeah, I love Kemi Badenoch. She's a great woman. I think we need to support her even more. You know, I've been following how the Black Tories are moving, and she's really making moves. And this attempt to expose her is only just giving her more clout, more votes. It's establishing her even more on the benches. But when it comes to her views, I mean, this wasn't said out in the open. This was said sort of
No, it
in
wasn't. It was leaked. It was
closed
leaked.
conversation. Yeah. And I think a lot of Black people have these type of conversations, and it's quite unfortunate that a politician who probably felt comfortable enough to talk amongst other Black people was, you know, leaked out like this. And to be honest, a lot of Black people have these views, and it's not that you can tell from the context of the conversation, it wasn't that she was the meaning, the history on colonialism. It's just the fact that it's being made the primary narrative on what our goal is as Black British people. Is it this is the conversation we're always going to have when Black topics are being brought up in Parliament? Are we meant to be talking about our progress, or are we always going to talk on a history? Yes, bring it up when it is necessary, but don't make it the forefront like we are the permanent victims of this society. More like, let's see what we could do and work on in our country bit by bit to get to where we want to be. And I'm convinced that that's what, you know, the Black Tory members are trying to do, is that yes, embrace ourselves, represent on both sides of the bench, but at the same time, let's not make it the ultimate conversation we will have every time we speak on Black issues.
I mean,
but yeah,
I
that's my stance.
You know, I agree with a lot of it. I think just sort of passing what you're saying, because when it comes to Black history, I mean, this is history. This is just a fact of life in terms of, again, we can argue about how important it is. That's definitely true. But I suppose for history, though, I think for that sake, it is something which is relevant to bring up. Now, when you talk about progress and moving forward, again, I agree. There's no way near I think we should let our history be a crutch. Now, I made sure I said this, that we should be talking about our history, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent, or whatever. And a part of that is, you know, colonialism and slavery and struggle. It is what it is. But yeah, I agree. It shouldn't be used as a crutch. The only reason why whenever I hear that, it just screams of gaslighting, because it seems like code when they say that as to.
I'll explain why. Yeah, I want to explain that real quickly, because if we really think of what the conversations are being set on, like from the small news pundits like Dominique and Esther, these girls who work on these news panels, to the top of, you know, the Parliament debates, when our issues are being brought up, listen to what the left are saying. So the people we know, such as what's his name, Lammy, and yes, David Lammy. I've spoken about her as Diana, but all the big names and the academics, they focus on that to the point where I know all the talking points. You understand? Like, I've followed it, I've read into Akala, I know all these narratives already, that I'm like, okay, I want to hear, what can we do today in this contemporary history we're in? What are Black British people doing? What are we planning on doing? For example, the politicians, what are they talking about in our communities? And if it always goes back to that history, it's like, well, we want to add everything to the plate first, and then we can embrace it. Yes, I think Kemi is probably one of the politicians who is frustrated. She has spent months in the Parliament responding to these questions over and over again. I don't know if you guys have watched her panel, the Q&As, but that's the only thing that's being brought up when it comes to her. And yes, she wants to speak on Black issues, but not about how, for example, during the BLM movement period, their focus was on a very Americanized narrative. Let's discuss our issues in a more realistic sense, but she was still being bombarded with the same, care for my words, BS. And I guess that frustration was seen in the group chat, and that might be seen as some way of calling her, a coon or a sellout for just basically talking against our own plight. And I don't believe that's the case. You know, she's an aware woman. A lot of these right wingers in the UK, to me, I'm babbling on, sorry, but to me, the UK conservatives are a lot more level-headed than the ones in America, because a lot of the Republican conservatives are very extreme. They sound to me very dopey when they speak on racism or even slavery. They seem to parrot rubbish. But in the UK, I feel like they are more contextualized. Like the Black Tories or the right-wing pundits, they say things to acknowledge what, you know, colonialism has done, but at the same time, let's push back. Like, let's make this debate balanced enough that we're not just victims anymore. But that's my stance. I've heard what you've said, and I don't want to sound like that coon too, because you know me, I've spoken on our history.
No, I mean,
but
I don't. Yeah, I don't like using that word. It for me, it's all about perspectives, and it's just understanding exactly your viewpoint. Because again, my viewpoint is balanced. I want to say it's balanced. It has a fair reflection on, again, the good and the bad, and how, again, this is why I say I don't. It's funny. I can never 100% disagree with a lot of things that even the left or the right say. I'm, to be honest with you. And again, going back to what you're saying, how, you know, there seems to be the focus is the key, isn't it? What you're saying, the focus is always about the negative. The focus is always about situations in the past which they want to almost kill off. And
Yeah.
I do agree with that. And I think from the left's perspective, what they're trying to say is there are certain things that have taken place which still has a lingering effect today. Now, this is the debate as to how much is a lingering effect. So a lot of these things that we talk about is because on one side of the coin, you have the left, which believes this event in time still plays a powerful role in what we are doing today. So people talk about white supremacy, critical race theory. All these things are classic examples of what the left will trope. Kehinde Andrews, David Olusoga, they all, I mean, obviously he's a historian, so he will talk about this kind of stuff, so it makes sense. But all these people, and Kehinde Andrews, I don't know if you ever read his stuff, but he talks about, he calls it the psychosis of whiteness.
I've listened to a lot of his debates, and I've really, I don't even want to say anything bad, but he triggers me. He triggers me.
Yeah, and
Let me
and
even
fair,
leave it.
there are things which I'm like, oh, you just like, yeah, it comes across as dopey. It comes across as just it's not even funny how it comes across. But that's the left in a nutshell. And then I suppose in the right, what they're saying, and this is, they're almost downplaying the effects of colonialism. Say, okay, that happened, cool. However, now that's not your issue. Now that's not the reason why you're in the state you're in. And some things I do agree with. And again, but as I was saying, some things are just a direct reference to the events that took place, i.e., something as simple as my last name, something as simple as where my parents are from, or say parents, my grandparents from, or my great grandparents. You know, something like that, which seems arbitrary now, but actually is very, very powerful. But again, we can argue about how it stops me or affects me. But even things such as when I was reading about France and its role in Haiti, and when it left and how it put Haiti in such a debt trap. And France has been doing that for a lot of African nations still to this day, which is still, we talk about legacy of colonialism. We talk about trade wars and laws and things that took place after the fact, and how you look at how France is completely shafted. That's the nicest word I can use. A lot of the Francophone nations in Africa, which we talk about effects, that's there to be seen. And again, I think Brits always get this nice tag because I have a nice PR system when it comes to a lot of these things. I'm not saying that they're the evilest person in the world, don't get me wrong, or they're the most perfect, but for me, the conversation always is about what effect. This is the left and the right. What effect do we still see of the effects of colonialism? But for me, sometimes when I hear these comments, and it just be how I interpret it from the right, it always seems a way of trying to silence the talk from a historical viewpoint. And I get it. It's because it always seems to be the viewpoint of black people, innocent, white people, not so innocent. And this is why I'll say this. And obviously you got a Nigerian background. This is where I think us Caribbeans, I sometimes listen in between the lines, because you guys talk about tribalism over there and talk about the powers that be and how they pretty much oppress a lot of the people over there in a lot of these African nations. And I'm just like, I was sitting back thinking, what is it that you guys know what we do not know about what took place before Europeans got here? Because that's always something that I've always wanted to really study in terms of what was the nations called before Nigeria and Ghana? What was it called before Mali, Senegal? What are these nations? What they look like? How was it? And I've still not really got a clear map to say this is what it looked like yet. So I'm always interested to hear when I heard Kemi Badenoch say that, I was like, there's something more to it which we need to add to the conversation, but I guarantee she'll get shouted down about it. That's the problem. So a lot of times conversation gets shouted down because we don't want to hear differences of opinion of, unfortunately, black people, we aren't as, peaceful as we thought we were before Europeans got here. We weren't as nice as we thought we were before they got here. You know what I mean? And that's what, for me, is the clear difference between the two.
Yeah, it gets very clear, because once you read into it even further, what Kemi was saying is pretty much connecting to the straightforward history on African and the transatlantic slave trade. We have to acknowledge it. Also, I wanted to touch on, before I touch on that, when you say the right wingers, the conservatives are trying to downplay our history, I think they're more trying to downplay the hypersensitivity of the Kehinde Andrews and the lefties that really want to emphasize on a goal. And to me, I think the left aren't just having a conversation and raising awareness. They want a solution, and their ultimate solution is reparations. And to me, That's the most, to me, that's the most ridiculous fairy tale concept to even have, because that will never happen. Why would you sell a dream to people who follow you, who follow your narrative, and expect them to push for that in a country that was the empire of, you know, what we call now the Commonwealth, that dominated and plundered, and expect them to pay it back? We're here to reclaim it however we want, but we're not gonna sit around and beg for it. That's my position. Do you get it? So when I hear that, me being a previous, you know, left winger supporter of all these, you know, writers and academics, I realized the smoke screen they were playing on is that for them to continue to lecture the right or just be on a panel is to fight for this sort of quote unquote reparations that we'll never have. And now, okay, going back to history, when it comes to Kemi Badenoch and her emphasis on the fact that we're not the special victims, that we aren't clear of all faults and accountability. That's the truth, because there's wars within wars between tribes. Even within tribes, people were plundering each other and sold off. It's not like one group against another. You have my bloodline in you because there's a mixture of all these different tribes that were fighting amongst each other. One lost this year, the next year, and the other tribe won and, you know, sold us off. So it was a interconnected rivalry. But then it's the same in every continent. So it's like, to understand history of our continent is to understand the rest of the world. That's how it was built. Like, for example, I learned last year that was it Japan or Korea? Japan. In Japan, they only ended slavery around the late 1700s amongst their own people. The emperor said we can't enslave our own, so we have to enslave people around us, the Koreans and the Chinese, and sell them off to the Portuguese. Did people know that in East Asia slavery existed too around the same time of the transatlantic trade? So at the end of the day, we only know our history, or we discuss our history, but then I'm still going further off and learning about the rest of the world and realizing that's the same pattern. And I think that's what Kemi was trying to emphasize, that it's not as any different or less or more insignificant than the rest of the world. And we are not the special victims that are can escape accountability. So yeah, that's how I take it.
No. And I hear that, because again, even when it comes to slavery, I mean, a lot of people don't want to hear this, but it wasn't as black and white as evil white person come to Africa and stole all these black people. Nah. They were, slavery was on the continent way before Europeans got here. There was something called the Arab or Arab slave trading, which preceded the European slave trade. And even up to today, I'm hearing reports of there's still slavery that happens in the continent. So when I hear these things, I'm like, the problem is, because of salacious headlines and things, the nuances gets missed. And I think that's where the right try and be a little bit more nuanced in their conversations, whereas the left, they seem to be more, again, and I get it. It's because our paradigms, we have to have almost like a protagonist and antagonist, someone who's the hero, someone who's the villain. We always seem to have that in our concepts in order for it to sort of play through. So we have to have who's the innocent victim, who's the evil oppressor. I don't know what it is. Again, movies are classic examples of this, where there has to be almost some sort of evil enemy or innocent. It always seems to be that case, and that's where it seems to be the left, where it's not a real world thinking viewpoint. But one thing I will say, which I just want to push back a little bit on what you're saying about, because I agree with where you said that slavery existed in Japan. Slavery existed, let's be honest, the Brits were enslaved by the Romans.
Right.
Slavery existed. You talk about the Ottoman Empire. We talk about, there's so many slavery that took place. And when
Africa, Russia,
Russia. When we talk about slavery, we seem to think it's just the transatlantic slave trade. Slavery has been in existence since the dawn of time. But again, it's like wars and the Holocaust. I mean, again, let's take this is a classic example. We talk about the Holocaust and we always talk about the Jews. What about took place in the Congo, in which the Belgian, what's his name, King Leopold, he exterminated so many black people. It was more than what took place in the Holocaust. But that sometimes certain history just seems to be more pivotal to certain groups. For whatever reason, I don't know. That's the key. I don't know why it is. It just is what it is. But some people, they hold on to their history about this particular incident more so than other groups. Again, why why don't some other groups care about this war as opposed to why we care about World War I, World War II? When, you know, we only care about what happened in Europe, what happened in Africa during that time, what happened, you know what I mean? All these things we care about, because for certain people, that's what they hold dear to their heart. That's what their group holds. And that's where sometimes I'm like, what we hold dear to our heart, whether we like it or not, is this period of time. And it always seems to be, this is so contentious, which for other groups, it doesn't seem to be as contentious. I don't hear Brits, I don't want to talk about 1066. I don't talk about the Industrial Revolution. I don't talk about this. Now, I will say this. It's probably because that's a good story for them to know. To know that they modernized the rest of the world, you know what I mean? Who won't want to hear that? To know that the inventors, I think that's kind of the difference I would like to see more when it comes to our history, to hear more about those things. But even sometimes when I hear that, I hear, oh, here we go again. You black people created this. You black people did this. You black people did that. There's always some sort of snide type of viewpoint when black people want to discuss their history or our history, which kind of just, yeah, for me, I don't know what it is, but that's what kind of gets me the most when I talk about this topic. It's not just about colonialism, but in general, I always get this impression that there's always a snide comment when we talk about history, maybe because of the brand, the marketing, the image of when we talk about history. It's always, here we go again. But that's how it always seems like to me. I don't know. Does that seem like to you? Do you get a little bit, here we go again when it comes to black history, or is it just only certain types of history that you learn?
We've had this conversation before. You know, I've mentioned how I'm a history junkie. I enjoy history of all sorts. But what I've witnessed, especially in the UK, is that when they refer to Black History Month, growing up, I saw more ADOS, Black History Month, more than the Commonwealth situation. So to me, it wasn't that, oh, here we go again. It's more like, oh, why are we so narrow in the history that's being spoken of? Do you know what I mean? So on that level, I felt, okay, this is played out. And also, personally, every month is a history. I learned something. Like there was a few years ago, I used to set a goal that every few weeks I will learn about individual countries in the diaspora. So I'll learn about African countries, and I'll learn about the ones in the islands. Then I'll learn about the predominantly South American regions that had Black people. And so that let me learn. I'm independently having that exploration. I don't really see why we need to encourage the British, system to force that into the schools. Because what I've said before is that I actually had that in my school on every October, but I know that not every UK school has that, because really it's very tactical. They knew that, okay, if a school had more than 15% Black students, then we'll make sure to have Black History Month there. So that's the explanation I found out about, is that not every school has it because they won't encourage it in every school. Do you think that that should be a thing, that in the UK, every curriculum, regardless of how many Black kids are in the school, should be taught Black History Month?
Well, this is what I was saying in my sort of monologue, that no, I think nowadays we should mobilize ourselves as a group unit to talk about our history or learn our history, and forget about everyone has to be included into it. So I will say this though, and I get the tactical approach, but I think history should be history. Now we're in the UK, so it majority will be white history, just because of, the history of this nation. It goes back far and wide. But no, in answer to your question, I think we as a group of people should take it on ourselves to educate our own youngsters. Because one thing I was going to ask you as well about, you talk about your independent learning, and this is the key when it comes to history, and this is why I say we should do it ourselves, is because at the end of the day, regardless of what you research, particularly if you read books and stuff, and I've been doing it, depending on who you read your book from will depend on your perspective of history, and depending on how you would sort of go down the rabbit hole. So if someone is not as inclined to look at other opinions on, let's say, the British Empire, one person would have a viewpoint that the British Empire was the best thing since sliced bread because it modernized the world. The nations benefited from it. There were poor nations before. Afterwards, when you look at some of the GDP, when you look at the infrastructure, the roads that were built, the governments that constructed, the fact of it mobilized, it modernized these nations. These nations after colonizations grew. Empirical fact, historical fact. But that's what Brits would teach. That's what they would say, because their viewpoint is we did a good thing. Now they may just say, oh, we did some bad things, but their overarching view that they impose on you is this was for the good. Whereas if you listen to somebody else's viewpoint on the empire, it will be a completely different viewpoint. So for me, the reason why I say no is because you're going to get that anyway, aren't you? You're going to get that viewpoint of whoever teaches his story is going to have a different viewpoint from somebody else's story. And again, when it comes to colonialism, this is the fight. The fight has always been, if white people are teaching us our history, as to what vantage point are they going to tell us our history? Whereas I say, forget all that, we control it. That's what I say to that. So we should control our own history, because at the end of the day, we need to decide how we want our history to be presented. That's the key. That's what I think.
Yeah, I understand that. Another point I wanted to make.
If let other groups tell our history, then it's like, well, number one, I'm like, would you trust it? I mean, do you trust the information that you get disseminated from certain people? You probably will, probably might not do. Even if they say they're historian, because there's so many historians. Again, you mentioned Kahinde Andrews. I said David Olusoga. Now they're historians technically. They're lecturers. They're professors. So these are academics. But would you really trust a book written by these authors if you give it to your child, for example? Or would you trust the history that they would teach upon your child once they grow up? Maybe yes.
Yeah, I'll make a distinction. Yeah, do you know what's funny is, I know
it's important who teaches the history. It's very important who teaches your history. That's why I'm saying it's something we need to decide, because that is the key point of distinction here. Who teaches you your history? Because that will tell you what type of viewpoint you have, at least growing up, until you do your own independent research. That will tell you exactly what you think of yourself and what the empire, the wars, whatever it is you learn. It all depends on whose viewpoint you're taking it from.
Yeah, I wanted to make another point in addition to what you just said. What I've noticed is that majority of people aren't really into history. Like, a lot of people don't really care for that curriculum, unless when it's necessary. So I guess remembering things, like making it designated into a month, might help people and encourage people to read up about things. But we live in an era now where we can find out anything within our fingertips. We can Google when was the first black this, first black that, or civilization this, and the internet has become making it even easier. Social media makes it easier to circulate a certain amount of information. Every year I'm learning something new. That's one thing I would know. And then when it comes to who's teaching you that history, I think it's very important that now we don't need a medium or a person to project that, but people who will promote it. So we have a lot of black historians in the UK. Someone like Kahinde Andrews, I would say, is not objective enough to rely on. So I will know of several few who are more circular historians. They're black, but they're more circular historians. So they view certain histories more than just African history. And when they do view African history, it's more of a sort of a archaeological standpoint, where they actually go to the places and see, where did our history link, ancestry this. But someone like Kahinde Andrews has a motive. So he's in panels where there's a political movement and there's a need to raise awareness, which is good. But someone like Akala are more likely to be reliant on, because he's not reinforcing a movement or anything. He's just giving you the facts. And that's how I see it.
The question I'm going to ask on that is, how would you discern that?
Tell the difference?
Yeah, that's it. Because of course, you've done your own independent research, and to your point, and I will say the history. When I was younger, I didn't really care for history, but as I got on older, I do care more about it. And I think that's just generally people have that same viewpoint. Unless you get forced to learn it, you're generally not going to seek out your history because you don't care about it, because it's in an ancient history, ancient books of forever time that we don't care about. It's not until you really get older where you sort of really want to learn about yourself, you care about it, and you appreciate it. But how will you discern that? That's the question, isn't it? Because obviously you have your own viewpoints based on what you've researched, but for everyone else, how will they discern that is the right person to learn from? And that's always been the key, because context is everything, even with fact. So I can state a fact, you can state a fact, but our conclusion points, what we analyze from it, could be completely different based on our already perceived narrative, you could argue.
Yeah, I would say when it comes to history, a historian that teaches his story or her story, however you want to call it, should be as objective as possible. If they sound objective, I think that's the simplest thing I could say to someone who isn't a history junkie, is that if the person isn't trying to impose a sort of a personal ideology, where they're passionate. There's nothing wrong with being passionate, but when it sounds like you have a motive to paint those people as the enemy and you as the victim, then that's where you're set in knowing who you're dealing with, because you're dealing with that person like Kennedy Andrews. He's painting white supremacy. He's talking about how Europeans are demonic and they haven't learned and changed their ways. And then you've got someone like Makala, who's careful with his words. There's another story, I forgot his name, but he basically balances out an understanding of what the transatlantic slavery contributed to, looking at what Africans did, looking at what Europeans did, and how everyone suffered. It actually didn't benefit anyone at the end. That's why the British government had to end slavery, because it was affecting their economy. No. Is that no? Listen, no. I'm saying that it's not that British people were more moral and they decided that we don't want slavery anymore. Is that it was impacting the economy of the British land when it comes to investment, and what was the banking system was affected by the amount of trade routes being and fraudulent forms of trading that occurred. That's why Britain had to end it, not because there was some type of special moral ground individuals.
Yeah, I agree, because this is what Britain always would try and impose, that they had some sort
that
of
they
moral,
ended it.
That we need to end slavery because after 200 odd years, now we decide, it's wrong. I'm like, no, it wasn't. It was because of finance.
But that's what I'm saying is that someone who reiterates what the textbooks say. The textbooks, if you read clearly, it would clearly say the British government only ended it because it was affecting the banking system. It wasn't that because Britain was great or anything. That's what I like about our curriculum, is that it has less of that rubbish where it tries to paint a good picture like the Americans love to do. They fought for freedom, when the truth is, whose freedom? The white man's freedom. But in Britain, there was no playing around with that. They knew why they ended it, and it was because of the banking system. That's what I'm talking about when it comes to history. If you're very passionate and Britain were devious, they only did it for their own cause, yeah, that's fair. But that's history. I mean, I think when it's made a realistic perspective, you have to understand that there's no special son, right? I mean, there's no special side to this. Like, no one is in the right or who's innocent, and not one side is the only victim. So that's why I place history on an objective stance, is to acknowledge that they're not the enemy either. If white people didn't exist in the world, another group would have done it to us, or we would have done it to someone else. So that's the stance I take. And I know that when I speak like this, let's say if I was on a news panel, it will sound like I'm downplaying the horrors that has happened, and then I'll be called a sellout or whatever. But I'm someone who's engulfed in that history. I've read into it so much, is that I'm more numb to the passionate views that people may have on what racism and slavery has done. I am seeing it from an objective stance because I've gone numb to the history. I've got slave bloodline in me. I've got slave masters bloodline in me. Black I don't know if there's white in me either, but that's what I'm saying. I've got both sides of me. So I would feel sorrow and an understanding of what our history involves. But I'm not going to make it a movement like someone like a Kennedy Andrews would do. Like, blame the oppressor when they're not alive today, but I have to blame their children. I'm not going to play that game with people. That's the stance I'm taking.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, and this is where part of the residual effect of ending slavery, in which I didn't notice till recently, where the slave trade was, in order to get rid of it, the British Empire paid off the slave owners to the tune of, at the time, 40% of its own GDP, which wasn't paid off now until 2015. Now, I know what you're saying in terms of, well, the people who enslaved us way back in the day are dead. Cool. But how in the hell were they still paying off the debt that was owed up until 2015? Who the hell was alive then? So again, this is sometimes where they get triggered, because when that information came out, I remember it pretty much, like, not like yesterday, but I remember it. I was like, raw. Think about that. They tell you forget about this, but they will never forget the debt that was. Now, keep this in mind that they didn't pay.
Yeah. I want to sorry, bro. I just want to make it, like, I want to point out what you said. It was a debt, right? And when I remember reading into that too, and I was like, okay, wow, it was still going on till now. I think it was very clear in the textbooks that they had to pay off the slave owners in the islands, the Caribbeans. They had to. So it's like, unless we have to kill off the slave masters or pay them off so that all the money they invested in slavery can be repatriated, or it's like that was the plan in the beginning. I understand it's kind of outrageous that it continued on for over a century, but it's like that was the measures that they had to take to change the system so that our forefathers could be free. And it's like, I don't know how else to take it, but that's the part of the history. And should we hunt down the what do you call it, the descendants of those people who benefited from that? Should we do that? Is that the solution?
Well, this is the question, because Lloyd's Bank have been beneficiaries of the slave trade money. There have been people like David Cameron's mentioned about it. These elites, and keep in mind that, again, to be fair and balanced, this is not just on the white side. Even on the African side, I'm hearing the elites in Africa have benefited from it. But to answer your question, I suppose it depends on certain people, and this is where I say this, where again, I call it part of a gaslighting technique when it comes to silencing these things, where other groups of people, I believe this, I can't prove it yet, but I believe if they experience something like this, they will still be asking for, listen, maybe not reparations in the clear sense of it, but they'll want to hunt down and say, how is it possible that you could have still paid off that debt after all these years, after saying it's now morally reprehensible? Our whole navy was set up to police the waters to make sure that no one was selling or buying slaves or going over the rivers, all these kind of things. Cool, sounds good in the open. Even the anthem that they have, Rule Britannia, rules the waves, the whole song that they sing for what's it called, the BBC Night of the Proms, which always gets sung.
Rule Britannia.
I mean, all these kind of things which sound so great and so patriotic, and then we look at the details, like, whoa, hold on a second. And I get it, it's a great situation, but I really do think other groups, they won't take too kindly to it, and they want to pay off slave owners. They wouldn't have done that. They wouldn't have done that, at least not to the point where once they're dead and gone, someone should have said, all right, come on now, who we're paying here? They had no connection to this. Let's forget about it. But anyway, I digress. But one thing I was going to say though about this, I want to pose this to you as well, because you talk about how this kind of talk you get called the C word. Do you think though that by creating a narrative that we have an enemy that fosters a kind of more unity, whereas once we create an environment where it takes that away, we become less unified as a group of people? And does that make sense?
Yeah, what I've noticed is the plight and the advocacy to raise awareness to that history is to try and unify us. If you look at throughout the early 1900s, when a lot of black movements in America were trying to not to create, but to remind us about the plight. So, for example, the Garvey movement, he's a guy from the islands that came to the east coast of America to spread awareness to, hey, we need to go back to the continent and rebuild. What he's doing is he's a black foreigner coming in and saying we have a one plight, we have the same struggle, and so we're gonna unify under this same message. But the thing is, that's another tactic to create some type of front in a good way, like when it comes to, let's say, our differences were from different countries, ethnicities, but we can all go under one thing. And what's the plight? That the enemy are the white man and we have to go against them, right? But then at the same time, that could be seen as a way to build a following. So you could be part of a movement but actually benefit from creating a movement and have a different ulterior motive. Like, for example, I might be one of few that speak on this, but I don't like Garvey's movement because I saw it as an issue simply because his idea of moving to Africa was just to take, a lot of people from America, from the islands to Africa out of nowhere and take over the lands that were there or that's already being conquered by the Europeans. Like, it was still colonized. So I don't know what his plan was. Was it to trick the Americans into funding his movement and then ending up in a continent that had no idea what he was doing. I feel like that's what the movement is what's happening today, is that there's a plight. And that's why I wanted to go back to what you said about the taxes still being paid off for these slave traders, right? There's a plight. Okay, we speak on it now. What's the plan? Do we want to raise awareness to it, or do you want to lead to something else? Oh, you want to talk about reparations? Oh, is that a movement that's realistic? Could we ever get to that position? I don't think so, because we would be owed trillions of pounds. But the idea of it is to linger in the followers that listen and say, hey, this is what we want to fight for, let's hope to get it. But you're fighting a losing battle. And I feel like that's what I don't like the left doing, is creating a plight that will never be solved or lead to. So the reason why a lot of these right wingers would downplay it is to make sure we don't waste our energy on something that will never happen. We are trying to overcome, and we continue to overcome, just like the Asians, because of colonialism, just like the all the other groups are doing. But we have to stop fighting the same plight that we've been attempted to fight for 80 years. We know, let's raise awareness. Let's speak on our past, just like the Jews speak on the Holocaust, but they're not waiting and sitting around. I get it. Some were paid off.
I was going to
But
say,
at this point,
they have paid.
yeah, but we
they got
can
land as well.
talk
Think
about it
what
because
took
of
place.
how recent. Look, we could talk about it because of how recent it was, and literally direct great parents or people who literally were in the whole Holocaust was being dealt with that way. I get that, but at the same time, they are still owed a lot more, and we're owed a lot more. But are we going to sit around and wait for who to give it to us? You know, it's like, I don't want to play that game with politicians. I don't want to sit around and blockade the roads and play Marxism because of my skin color. I'm not playing that game with them, and I want more black people to kind of build on a different movement.
I see what you're saying, but I think it's just, there's two things here. So there's the cause. So there's the overall cause that that we need to have. I think it's a case of, how do we mobilize to do that? That doesn't mean that we have to, like you said, blockade the road like flipping Insulate Britain have been doing, and all that kind of nonsense that's been taking place. I'm not saying we should be doing that. I'm saying, for example, and the reason why I think the Jews managed to get the reparations after it happened is because a lot of them are in power, positions of power, particularly how, you all know about the Jews. Again, a lot of it's stereotype in regards to they control the media, but a lot of these things are because at the end of the day, the people who were influenced, they weren't even like German Jews. Keep in mind that all the Jews across their diaspora, they were affected by something that happened in Germany and Poland for the most part, but they all came together, and again, they were highly influential. So I think that's kind of what it is. I agree with what you're saying, that we shouldn't necessarily, it's almost like we're flogging a dead horse, but I think it's because we are not in positions of power to affect change. That's the difference. So maybe the cause itself is not necessarily a bad cause. I mean, you can agree or disagree whether it's reasonable, whether it's fair or not. Okay, cool, I got you, I give you that. However, I think the reason why we don't get what we get or want is because at the end of the day, we're like beggars asking the king for steak, and he's just giving us crumb. That's the difference. We need to get ourselves into the palace. We need to get ourselves, you know what I mean, as the kingship. Then we can say, all right, let's do this. That's what I think that it needs to be. So I get what you're saying. Let's not be some sort of, defeatist. Oh, please sir, can I have some more? So that kind of stuff. But the causes still can be good. It's just a case of, let's be fair. Let's just get ourselves in position of power, which is what you're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about, man. Yeah, I'm telling you, that's the plight we should really be focused on. I mean, someone said here that Duke has some right wing talking points. Hey, I would accept that's the truth. My point is, I think this is the direction we have to take at this point. You said that we should be in positions of power. Hey, Kemi Badenoch is probably in one of the highest positions for a black politician in the UK right now.
Her viewpoints, definitely. Her cause, I mean, no offense, but
or do you think that she's...
If Kemi Badenoch had the option to give reparation, do you think she would do it?
Why would she? We have a different goal. That's why I want to sit on this. Listen. That's why I want you to listen. I followed Kemi Badenoch for a while, and I know this woman is no joke. She's not like some type of bounty or coconut. She was raised in Nigeria. Okay, she was raised in the village. She knows the plight of the African in the UK. You know, she has relatives here as well. So what she is embracing is Black excellence, something that we should be doing a lot more. I see a lot of Americans are doing it to an extent, but we need that a lot more in the UK. We like to play on the victimhood when really we should move like the Jews. We should be moving like the Asians. We're not playing around anymore. We want to be successful. We want to collect what we're owed by earning it. So if you put yourself in a position of power and you see Black faces in certain places where on both sides of the bench we are representing constituents that don't even look like us, I think that's the movement now we need to take on. So, for example, Kemi has made a point a lot that when it comes to schools, find ways to mitigate proper forms of education for Black students in the UK. A lot of us are doing well, but we're going into universities a lot more than the average British white kids. So
Africans are for sure. Caribbeans, I think we're like white working class boys for some reason. I've been looking at some.
We can pick. Hey, Caribbeans are picking up too.
Yeah.
But they still overrepresent more than the average white. So Caribbeans are more likely to go into universities than white British kids.
When I went to a recent graduation, I have to go to a recent one. I didn't hear any Caribbean names. All these black names. Like, where are they? But anyway, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, but what I would say is that when it comes to, I was going to make a topic on this on the stream. The Black migrant plight has always been the same in even America. Like the Caribbean migrants in the UK, in America, are more likely to be successful because of that migrant plight. And I think we're no different from how the Asians behave or the other groups that are foreign. We come in with further drive. So that's, we've had that conversation before, but that's the plot I want the Black people in the entirety should have in the UK, is that's what we want. We acknowledge our history, but we want to grind. We want to continue to represent somewhere, but fight for it. It's not going to be handed down to us like the left want us to do. Oh, let's just make sure that 20% of CEOs are represented. They have to be Black. No, we have to find ways to compete there and make it there ourselves. No more handouts. I'm tired of that conversation. And that's why, yes, I sound like a right winger, but you can hear a different perspective here. I'm speaking on someone who grew up in, the estates as well. I know what grind looks like. So I'm having I'm using that language now to make people understand that, oh yeah, I might have right wing views, but I want us to grind. I want us to get there. And I feel like I've got tired of what the left wingers were saying. All they like to do is just sit around and complain. No, I want to make moves. So and someone like Kemi, I resonate with more because she fights for that. But at the same time, she doesn't want us to sound like victims. We want Black excellence.
No, I agree with that. I agree with the Black excellence part, but again, just taking it back a little bit, and I'm just going to use white people as an example because, again, in England, there's a massive divide between like North and South, and a lot of things that have taken place, which because of group politics, the elites have controlled a lot of things where other people, as much as they want to say they want to strive for excellence, they've been held back. So sometimes when I hear these conversations, and I made mention of this, but I hear what you're saying about excellence, but sometimes when it gets to a position, she now turns into what I like to call, she's more of an elitist. She now becomes more, it's like a form of classism where because I've made it to this situation here as a Black person, that must mean I don't want to hear any other Black person complain ever again. That's how it comes across. You see what I mean? That's sometimes where I've seen a situation where it's almost like sometimes I want to be the only Black person in the room at times when it comes to these events. And then when another Black person comes across, I don't know what it is this I won't say animosity, but it's like this feeling. But sometimes when I hear this sort of talk, I'm like, I get you, I do. But sometimes it when you get to a stage and a level, it just screams a bit like, now it's elitism. Now I'm here. Now I'm sitting at the table here. Now I don't really care about the plight of other ordinary Black people. That's sometimes how it can scream a little bit. I don't know. Do you ever get that sort of? And again, they can come from all these states. I come from here. That's always used as a trope. I hear that all the time from politicians. Oh, I come from here, but you don't give a shit about that person because you've made it out. You've done what you need to do. Now it's a case of, oh, well, like Margaret Thatcher was a classic example. Sorry, I'll let you speak in a second, but Margaret Thatcher is a classic example where people actually don't credit her for women into parliament, getting more women in MPs, because she was of the viewpoint that because she made it, fuck what any other woman's saying, because I've made it at the highest office. Now, you could argue that's right, but she didn't actually help other women get into MPs. As a matter of fact, I heard she hindered other female MPs because she didn't take their complaints as serious, because in her viewpoint, she made it boom. So sometimes I'm like, I see that a lot with black folks at the moment, where you just have this air of I've made it, therefore I don't care what other black people, the group saying, fuck you guys. You know what I mean? I get that. I see that, even if they come from the same environment that they've come from.
You know, it's cool that you mentioned Margaret Thatcher as well, because there was a picture with her and Kemi Badenoch. Because when Kemi Badenoch joined the Tory, it was around the time her late period, and she actually mentioned how Margaret Thatcher supported her in her joining the party as well. But I think when it comes to that, Margaret Thatcher represented someone who felt that if I made it on my own, why should I make it easier for other women? Why can't they just follow my example?
Yeah.
You know, it's like a boxer saying, why should I make it to the top and then help my opponents get in easier, because I'm a black boxer or something. But I get that. I think there's more of a competitive nature with that when it comes to females in politics. Like today, look, the Tory parties have made already 2 female prime ministers. I mean, what the Labour Party do? Let's not talk about that.
That's true. No,
that's
you're right. You are 100% right. All the talk
Mhm.
about how Labour are inclusive and all that kind of other stuff, Conservatives have 2 female prime ministers. So you're right.
And it's not like they made it made it easier for the women. For some reason, the women were more aggressive when it came to reaching the top. But yeah, another thing I was going to bring up. Oh, I don't want us to go on a tangent. It was the one thing you mentioned on the plight and how we downplay. I would say Kemi Badenoch, for example, if you do sit through her parliament talks, she's a very balanced woman. Like, she doesn't play this, oh, I don't care about racism. I don't know. She doesn't do that. I think what's dangerous about these articles is that they pinpoint and put certain comments on a microscope instead of acknowledging what she said into an entirety. She's embraced race representation. Even some people might say that she's too center left when it comes to race in her speeches. So it really comes down to knowing the person properly. Like, Kemi Badenoch is not that person. I don't know who. For example, I don't think of any UK politician who talks like that. I know a lot of American politicians sound so delusional. They don't like talking about slavery in a balanced way. Like, Candace always has a problem with doing that. Sometimes she doesn't acknowledge the bad things the Republican Party has done. She kind of just defends them regardless. But I don't see that in the UK. I feel like it's too dangerous to play that game where everything is antagonize the opposite bench, antagonize them. No, they actually acknowledge, okay, yes, Britain was a shithole for us, but we're in a better place now. Do you know? That's what I've seen.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I've studied the Tory lot a lot. I've studied the black Tories. They don't play that game where they're cooning it up. Sorry for using that term. On
not
the benches.
Not at least in public. I think they
give me an example.
Labour, well, I mean, you could argue, like, for example, this leak WhatsApp message. I mean, again, like you said, they don't do it in public, but maybe in the back chats. Again, I don't agree with how this came out. This was a leak. I want to say it was an associate and probably maybe a friend. I don't know if it's still a friend today, but you see what I'm saying? And I was talking about it was leaked by another black woman. I was like, okay, it's a bit like jealousy, because Kemi Badenoch's now taken on more responsibility in the cabinet. She got, like, due to the reshuffle, she had more responsibilities now because they must love what she's doing. But even when it comes to, do you remember the Equalities report that took place a few months back?
I read through it.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. Of course, headline read was basically Britain is a model of a beacon of light for race relations. It didn't say it was perfect, by the way. It even said, I remember reading it, and the first paragraph said racism still exists, but the headline didn't read it that way. But things like that, which it's more balanced. But again, this is where it feeds into the narrative of, again, you can only imagine behind the scenes how they feel and how the Conservatives seem to lean towards a narrative. Now, they may not be as divisive, like you said, as people across the pond. I will agree. Into the fact of they won't. This is where I call them sellouts, where Candace Owen would only talk about things which support her narrative. She will never engage upon things which don't, which she has to hold hand up and say, Republicans, they didn't free the slaves because they had, you know what I mean? They didn't do it like that.
Yeah.
All this kind of good stuff. But again, it's just a case of, for us in public, we have a better persona, but behind in the back, there are things which I suppose, like this conversation here and other things which I guarantee in later months or years, you'll probably hear some worse things that they talk about Black people, or worse things that they have. And again, it just screams to me a little bit of, sometimes it come across as elitism on the right hand side, where they've made it, they're Gucci, they're cool, you know, they're on their 80,000 plus salary at least as an MP, and obviously more so if you depending what role you're in, and then it's like, you should be able to get where I got to. And I'm like this, it sounds good, but when I use a sporting analogy, this is what I always say. If you follow like football, not everyone is going to be Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo as much as you want to be. Not everyone's going to be blessed with certain skills, or not everyone's going to have even the opportunity to. There's some footballers who, for whatever reason, it could be location, it could be just talent, or it could be just a coach not picking them. They ain't going to get the same opportunities as someone else has. But does that mean that you shouldn't, if it's a case of helping your fellow footballer because you may see them as competition? I don't know. But sometimes it just screams of that elitism because I've made it here. I'm that person. Now it's just like, it is what it is. That's sometimes how it comes across. But I know you're saying that she's more balanced than that, but it's probably the media, how it plays a role in. Because let's be honest, Kemi Badenoch, when it comes to Black people on the left, she's not held in high esteem at all.
They don't want her to. Do you know why? She's a very bright woman. And that's the thing. When you listen to her speak, she knows to counteract certain arguments, like as a politician should. But for some reason, the Labour Party has bad representation of Black MPs. For some reason, I forgot the name of this woman. She represents Leicester. She is
Claudia Webb.
Oh my gosh!
Huh? I know. I try. Sometimes I do try to do. I hear you. She was tweeting some stuff. I forgot. She was tweeting a lot of stuff, and I just like.
She shouldn't even be allowed to tweet that much. That's the thing. I mean, I don't want to get to her directly, but what is the Labour Party doing? Are we just allowing anyone to represent us in the parliament? I don't care about left or right, but if you're a Black person as a politician, you represent us, regardless of your views. And if you sound stupid, mind my language, if you sound ridiculous, you make us look bad. So even if a right winger talks like that, I would be so offended. So for me, it's like, when it comes to politicians, like on the right, they actually want more Black people to think like them. They want to see a change, but they know that in order to make a big difference, you have to pander, and we don't want to pander. You know, pandering would only lead to more liberal behavior. I mean, we want to see aggressive change, but you can't do that on the left. The left don't want change. They want to keep us on limbo. They want to keep the Black community on limbo. Look what they're doing. The Democrats have been fooling with Black Americans for decades. We don't want to play that game like they do. Yeah, so it's like we want to see aggressive change.
True. Yeah. One thing I'll say about that though, again, and this is again, which is why I fall out of love with when someone says what part am I affiliated with, I'm like, I'm not really affiliated, because, for example, we talk about Labour and the left and what they've done, and I'm like, okay, cool. But even the Conservatives, I'm like, the Conservatives have always been known for the party for the elites, and the Conservatives have always been known for a party who only cares about a certain demographics. Now, even when it comes to what's going on right now, because Conservatives have been in power for the last 10 years, easy, and they've both seen recessions, pandemics, and we've seen now they're raising taxes. National insurance being raised, council tax being raised, all these things which will affect, let's be honest, they're not raising universal credit, which affects the poorest of people. There's certain things where I'm like, sometimes I hear rhetoric coming from the right, and I'm like, okay, I don't know. Labour, I'm always disillusioned with, because for me, they just seem to be a hopeless bunch of just, what's the word? Dreamers. That's how I see them, especially at the moment. But even the right, I'm disillusioned with a lot of them, but that's another topic for another day. One thing I was going to add, one thing I was going to bring it back to, sorry, Black History Month, is how do you see this month going forward? How would you like this month playing out? So what I suppose in that question, what would you want the conversation to be about?
I would say that we've gotten to a point where Black Lives Matter has dominated the news and the media for a few years now, which is good. Raise awareness to our existence. That's definitely good. But we have to take a position where we're also looking forward to the future, right? What are we going to do now? We're going to show more positive views. I think I saw someone comment say that we know the negatives now. I think we are overly saturated. I mean, well saturated with the knowledge of our issues. Yes, the whole world knows about it. Britain knows about it. So now let's make sure we bring some limelight to the good things, to how things are progressing, to who represents us in politics, who represents us in music, sports, wherever, academics, in science. Like someone said that before. We know our history, keep it balanced, keep everything on the good side of things too. Our children need to see that. Our children need to see positive things. Growing up, they want to be encouraged. When I was in school, when they taught Black History Month in my school, they made sure to show us the first Black scientist, the first Black astronaut, the first Black this. I want to get to a point where I don't have to say first Black anything anymore. We are dominating one field or whatever. You get it. Let's embrace it all. And that's how it should feel. You know, it's like it should be like Christmas. When I think of Black History Month, it should feel like, yeah, this is my time. You know, not. I don't want to offend anyone else, but not like Pride Month, for example, has a mix of all of that too. The history of homophobia, but also they celebrate and express themselves. Yeah, I don't think we're on the same level on that. But when it comes to our history, it might not have to be Black History Month, but if we have it, let's use it properly. You know, so that's how I see it. Yeah,
I hear you, and I think you've been pretty fortunate, I suppose, in your upbringing that you've had those sort of.
I was lucky. Yeah,
yeah. So I think again, and this is where even speaking, talk about Kemi, where she talks about she was raised and she had an African history and she had this, and I was like, and this is it, cool. But again, not everyone's had that, isn't it? And again, everything's down to your experience, your viewpoint, your perspective, and it is what it is. But again, I've always said this, that we need to. And I think it's just how the press rolls with things. Because again, things are just more salacious to hear about, again, for us at least, these negative tropes about slavery and how Edward Colston was part of, had these slaves. I think it's more salacious to hear those kind of things just because I think the media knows how to trigger certain groups of people with certain things, which is why they do it. And it gets so much press coverage, even though, again, especially during this month, I do hear a lot of positive things. It just may not be it definitely isn't as well received or well known as, let's be honest, the negativity in regards to our history. That's probably just where it is. Again, like the Holocaust, if you used to say Jews in history, that's the first thing that comes to your mind. I don't know whether they all like that, but it is what it is. Whereas for us, the first thing that comes to the mind is, you guessed it, slavery, colonization. So I think that's just what it is. It's just the part of it's
bro.
We do it, but part of it's just the marketing.
I would say this though. I would say the conservative side of the Black voices. I've only just been vocal the last 3 to 4 years, because even before that we didn't really have it to this extent, like this conversation, because of what's going on in the world. So when it comes down to, I think they're just speaking out because the left have been so brazen over the years that, okay, we want to show that there are other voices in the country too. Like, not all Black people think the same. And that was refreshing when I saw that on BBC, on Question Time, that, hey, there are other people that think like me and we're all on a different spectrum, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I know it looks and sounds like they're just trying to undermine our plight, but I know for years we haven't heard that type of voice before, they've never placed emphasis on undermining our history. It's more, let's talk about this, but other things too. You see, we've had enough. We've heard enough of Candy Andrews for an hour. Let's talk for an hour with Kemi Badenoch. That's what I'm seeing more of. And I think people on the left, or who are more center like you, it irritates you to hear it, but it's refreshing for someone like me. So it's unfair to say, oh, they need to stop talking like that. But for me, I'm already annoyed with someone like Candy Andrews. I've heard enough of him, but I would listen to him, but I want someone else on the panel that represents my views. That's all.
No, I understand. No. Yeah. I mean, this is why, again, GB News was branched off, and because of that fact, that again, a lot of it is in response. And this is what I mean when I say the right seems to, it's always for Black folk, it seems to be a reactive instead of proactive. It's because the narrative has always been this. Therefore, let's change. Let's just go against the narrative. I get it. You want to bring a different viewpoint as opposed to just bringing something different, if that makes sense, or being a bit more. But I hear you. But GB News, there's always that the do needs to be balanced, and this is why we're supposed to, in government terms, we have a left and a right, because we should have strong opposition to go against each other. Because at the end of the day, what that actually happens is you should learn from each other and you should strengthen your argument, which means you may know something that, oh, I didn't know that the left discovered, or the left side, oh, I didn't know that. That's what the right told me. You know what I mean? So what should happen in a again, that's probably utopia, is each side should be almost equally weighted, so that there's almost like a strong base, so that your arguments get sharpened. But yeah, that's a whole other conversation. I just wanted to pick up on a conversation, because this is something that I hear a lot, especially over this gang, and because the BLM and everything that's going on with not just by Cashapp, but just in general. Why should somebody get a job just because they call it? It's about quality. Now, this is another thing again, which I hear you. But you know what kills me the most? When white people get the job, no one ever says, oh, that person got it because of, maybe they do. But when white people get the job, that's never the argument, even though they could have got it because they were friends with so-and-so, or because they're the son of a flipping lord, or they're, you know what I mean? They got in there because of nepotism. Because I look at Boris Johnson, for example, and I look at some of the people who are white. I'm like, sometimes I think to myself, I swear down, I hate using this trope, but if that person was not who they were, I promise you, they would have not got that job. So even when it comes to, I hear, oh, black people are there for tokens, they would have never got that job if they were black. I'm like, there are white people who I can say the exact same situation. But when
I can speak on that.
Like, oh no, whenever a white person enroll, it must be because they got quality. But whenever a non-white person there, oh, it's because of tokenism. I'm like, that's bullshit. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can quickly speak on that. I think if you think about it, white people who come from a well-to-do background, upper class or something, see me in my position, and let's say we're in the same role or same position, I know I can look at them and say, you got here because you had a silver spoon in your mouth and made it here. I had to grind myself there. But if there was a policy that created a way for me to get into that same position and call it affirmative action, then they also have the right to look at me and say, you got in because of your collar. So I felt comfortable looking down on the person who had the metal spoon in their mouth, but now they can do the same thing to me. And I don't want to play that game. No, to me, it's not. And it's even worse on our side, is that they just look at us and say, you just got in because you're black.
That's because there's a visible difference. So for example, you're right.
Yeah.
You can't tell the difference between someone who had a silver spoon unless you can hear how they speak, what they sound like, all that kind of other stuff. So you can't tell. However, what you're saying for me just sounds like what we're trying to do is level the playing field. So that's not the case. People are there because, you know what, you are good enough to be in that position. But I get what you're saying. It's just because you're a visible minority and you can tell, well, it must be because you're black, and we saw this law that says we must, the Equalities Act, or whatever the act is called. So I'm just like, for me, it does scream a little bit different, but I hear what you're saying.
But I would rather that they can tell that I grinded myself to get here, that there was no affirmative action in this company that I joined, that I got here. I grew up in Hackney. I went to an average school, and then I came to the same position they're in. They would respect me more than if there was a policy to make sure that I got there because I was black. So I would rather, as I'm trying to speak for black people, not for how other people look at us, that you will feel more prideful that you got to that same position because you fought for it. Yeah. So that's my stance. I understand that, of course, that if it's gonna take us 2 times harder to get there, that's unfortunate. That now means a lot of us will be left behind. But it's like, if we're given the extra help because of how we look, I don't think that's going to change anything, because look at the example in America. If you look at America, they've had that type of system for decades, and that's actually made things worse on both sides. People look down on them.
Yeah. And again, I can argue the situation again. We bring it back to like the white people, where again, you look at MPs, you look at their backgrounds, you look at even the Labour and the Conservatives. Jeremy Corbyn, his background, Boris Johnson, his background. They're all eating class. There's a whole, again, in the UK, there's a massive class divide, isn't there? So there's a whole trope about, again, they are still beneficiaries of that silver spoon that you talk about, where we're still trying to take that barrier down, because a lot of working class white people who aren't from these same areas, who don't have that silver spoon, they can't get in. So sometimes I'm just like, I hear what you're saying about working harder, but in life ain't fair, is it? Let's just be real. Life ain't fair. It's not fair that you grew up in a certain area. It's not fair that you're this color. It's not fair that you may have a disability. It's not fair that it's just not fair. It is what it is. And I'm just like, hold on a second. So it's okay. Are we saying that we should almost, I won't say hinder ourselves, but almost, someone said we're too prideful to accept a helping hand to get to a place where other people.
Let's I want to tackle that, because I think people's psyche, they're not contemplating what I'm even saying right now. What I'm saying is, the elite's children that made it to that position, okay, sure, we can talk on that. That's a minority, but the majority of workers, the majority of people fighting for that same position are also white working class or white middle class, or in the same, you know, bracket that I grew up in, but because they're white, they are not looked at the same way as me as a black boy growing up in the UK. The majority are still white, okay? People who apply for the same jobs. Yes, some people went to Eton and they got the top jobs and got there faster. Someone in the family had to work hard for their children to get to that position. And I think we've accepted that, but when I look at someone who had an easier life, I would look at it, you had an easier life. But as a black person who got to that same position, I don't want to be looked at because they just picked me because I was black. It's not just pride, it's more my excellence is more amplified that I got here without any help, you know. I don't think that system would work if we have a form of affirmative action. It just wouldn't work in our favor. They would even scrutinize our applications even more. Well, no, like they did do in
but they call it the Diversity and Equalities Act. So I think it's a
case of the positive discrimination, right?
Not even just that, but I think it's a case of they can show they're not discriminating. But I hear what you're saying. You want to you want to get there on merit. That's exactly what you're saying. You want to make sure, and you're going to feel good about yourself because other than some guy who have a silver spoon, he was born in this. You want to be that person because it will make your story that much better that you did it on your merit, which again, as a man, I don't disagree with that at all. I can't. As opposed to
look at one thing, a good example, not even just by hypothesis, but look at the fact that in the UK there are disproportionately more African students in UK universities than the average white working class without affirmative action. That represents something, because if there was affirmative action in our universities, then people will say, oh, they just got there because they got help. But we didn't. So it's like, remove the factor that we got the help and see that actually we are fighting for the same positions without that help, you know, and majority of the country don't have the privilege either. You know, we always talk about the elites, but they make up a small minority of the workforce. I'm talking about the majority of the country. But I get your point too. Yeah.
And just on that point, because I was reading some information, I know you said not affirmative action, but there are things called contextual grades, which depending who you believe, where depends what postcode you're from, what they will do is, if you didn't maybe get the have A stars in A levels, I never understand that, but if you don't get A's but you're from a certain postcode, they'll still let you in the university just because you are from a different background. So so there's things like
that's the solution to that, you know, silver spoon in a child's mouth.
This is it. So there's so many things which we do on a clever basis than saying outright we're going to do this. So I don't know. The things which Brits do are very clever, which is crazy. Rotep.
Would that be considered affirmative action though?
Kind of, yeah. It's
without the race factor. It's more of a class.
We're quite clever in how we do things. We call it contextual grades. We slightly change the wording so to the uninitiated, you wouldn't think it is, but it is.
Because in America, they have, with the universities, even if you've seen with the Asian kids crying about racism in the university, it's more so to keep a balanced and diverse student population. And it's not necessarily about race, like you mentioned, but just because, you know, white students would have. I'm listening to you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So why do you think that matters? Why is it that if Asian kids are, I guess, over admitted into a school?
You got to think a university school isn't just about, unless you're talking about a technical university like MIT.
Yeah.
But like a lot of these liberal arts universities, like, come on, it's not all about just not necessarily a meritocracy. You know what I mean? Like, because
Shouldn't it
okay,
be?
well then shouldn't what about the rich white people who kids get into the university because their parents make a donation?
Yeah, that's the system that they've been playing on for a long time. It's just that when
Okay,
you
so there never was.
encourage,
So the fact of the matter is, it never was this meritocracy that there's always been politics involved in school admissions. You know what I mean? So now they're just creating a system to make it a little more balanced to get a diverse set of students.
yeah, and then what happens is I noticed there's a crack. That's the same thing White Matters was making, is that of course the white elites have been benefiting for decades already, centuries. But what about the majority white population that might have the same economic problems as the rest of us? Why is it that when we base it on race alone, we actually ignore that majority? Like that's
Ignore
the
what
thing about in
majority?
the UK. No,
Ignore what?
like
Ignore the white majority?
the white majority that are middle class or
They get ignored,
poorer in that system, in that race system that's being created now.
and that's a problem for you.
No, I'm saying that it wouldn't make sense if we play that game. We're not mitigating the
But
problem. We're just creating another
I'm
problem.
not in the UK. I'm ADOS, so I don't really like shed no tears for the disenfranchisement of white students or whatever. Like, it's not that big a deal of me. I don't really look at it from that perspective.
Okay, then that's where I defer, because look, I don't see it like that. I think that when you say it like that, that's very tribal. Is that okay? You don't care about this group because they're white, even if they have economic problems. That's not my problem because I'm black. So that's me saying, look, that's what you said.
No, let me just expound on what I said. Being as though I'm ADOS, right, and I come from a historically disadvantaged group, right. So those same white kids who you're sympathizing from, when we weren't allowed to attend schools with them, period, and had to fight for the right to even attend schools that they were able to go to, right? So now in 2021, I'm not going to shed a tear and pick up the mantle to fight their battles.
Okay, so at 2021, you're an individual, probably someone, your age, like going into university. Are they to blame for what happened the generation before? That's how I see it. I'm not seeing it as white or black. It's more like, hey, but then they're not going to benefit from anything.
They're benefactors of it. Their parents and grandparents benefited from the systems that was in place that put them at an advantage over black people. So they're a benefactor of those systems. You know what I'm saying? Their parents were in a better position than our parents and grandparents. So you know what I mean? I have no reason to sympathize for them. If anything, it's just a good waste of white privilege. If anything, their parents failed them and didn't take advantage of the opportunities they had, but they had the systems in place to put them at an advantage over black people. So why would I sympathize or even fight their battles or even care about that's weird.
No, that's where
I'm ADOS though. I'm ADOS though, so I'm not in the UK, and I know it's a different dynamics between black people and white people in the UK. So I take that into consideration.
Yeah, I understand that point. One thing, I saw your comment when you came in, or you said you responded to my prestige comment, right? Yeah, I was only saying it like, hey, I'm take pride on my culture. Look, I feel like we're rocking it here, so that's how I saw it. I wasn't like trying to slide this ADOS,
Nah, I don't get offended by ADOS comments. So, but that's interesting though, because you describe yourself. You say Black Brits.
Yeah.
So that's what you identify as, a Brit.
Yeah, I'm Nigerian. I'm British born. There's nothing special about it. There's no difference. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So over here we identify as still Brits but black.
Like how you, of course, your history is a lot more rooted because you're American.
Let me ask you this,
African American. Yeah.
Because I see some people that still identify with their parents' homeland, so they're still identify as Caribbean or Nigerian or Ghanaian. They don't really take up the whole British identity necessarily.
Yeah, they would do it in a certain context. You know what I mean? It's like if they had to, they would say they're British. Like, let's say if they went back to their homeland, they would distinguish themselves as English.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also Oh, is he gone?
Oh, he's gone. Oh, maybe he'll come back.
One thing I'll say to that, it's very tactical how it's done. For example, when it comes to, let's say, a footballer, they'll quickly claim that they're English. When it comes to the Olympics, they'll quickly claim that they're British. When it comes to other things, all of a sudden this other flag comes out of nowhere. So I clock that a lot of times it's, and then they try and say I'm this and that. A lot of times it's just disingenuous. Wherever the wind blows, wherever it is, they'll claim it.
Yeah, they usually say the Jamaican born, whatever. Did this, but
I've seen that when controversy hits. I didn't know it was you, Black Commander. I was thinking, who are you? But yeah, now I know who you are.
What's up?
Yeah.
How's it going?
Good. And how are you, the Duke, and how are you? Why matters?
Yeah,
I'm good, bro.
I'm doing well. I don't know how far you came in, but the last part of the conversation, we're kind of talking about, is it right that I suppose we get, now unfair treatment to get preferential treatment in order to get, place at universities or just even work to offset prior treatment?
This is it's a bit tricky because you know what, I think I'll listen to the panel and then I'll give my opinion after.
Now, Bo,
I'm still on the fence.
No, that's fine. Now, Bo, you left before. I don't know if you heard what we said about whether we class ourselves as Caribbean or African or whatnot. Did you hear that at all?
Yeah, I got the gist of it, and I think what you said. A lot of people are disingenuous about it and just pretty much go with the win when it suits them.
Kind of. I'm not saying that they're not proud of it. Don't get me wrong. But a lot of times when I see it, it all depends on what the context is. It's all a case of depending on what the audience is, will depend on what flag that they really claim. You see what I'm saying? So, yeah, I'm not saying that they're all. Some of them are. I think some of them are disingenuous. Some of them it could.
You think that's a choice? You think they choose to do that, or they've just realized that depending on the setting is how they'll be classified? So even if you identify as Nigerian, if you was to get off a plane in Lagos, are Nigerians going to consider you Nigerian, or will you be a black Brit, a Brit? You know what I mean? So
they'll call me Britoko or Ajay Bota. Like, yeah, basically, I have my name, of course, I have my family, my culture, but I'm already distinguished when I'm there. Like, I'm different. And hey, I don't look at it like I'm being ostracized. It's more like, oh yeah, I identify with where I grew up. I also identify with my roots. And it's very easy. I think it's easy for people who grew up in Britain to feel that way. It's definitely different from how ADOS feel because your history is in the soil of America, but then at the same time is like your African ancestry, but you're not gonna claim an African place. It's like America is your land, basically. Yeah.
I think one thing I'll say though, I think for me, I think a lot of Brits at some point have this identity crisis as well, Botek, where, like, for me, I can't claim that I'm really Caribbean because I've never lived there. I wasn't born there. I barely go there. I think I've been there twice in my whole life. So I can't claim that kind of stuff. I don't know where I've been born and raised. Like, it is what it is. So a lot of time, especially how, depending on what generation you come from, you could be third, fourth generation. You're just a Brit. You forget all the I know you're black. You may have links back to wherever, but you are a Brit. And I think a lot of black Brits have a bit of identity crisis as to where do they fit in and who are they from. Because if you go back to maybe, again, as the Duke was saying, Nigeria, or go back to Caribbean or in other parts of Africa, you're not seen as them. And then you're not seen as a Brit fully because you're black. It's always been a bit of a, there's been a bit of a, for me, an identity crisis that exists. And even like Kemi Badenoch was discussing, she talked about her identity crisis because she's different when she's in the UK. So I think a lot of us, we have a hell of a lot more of an identity crisis about who are we, because you could argue we have so many links to so many different places, and it's like it gets really, really confusing.
Hey, let me ask you a question though, because I know I was late though, so I probably missed it though. But about the topic though, forget about colonialism, or I forgot exactly what it said, but I feel colonialism isn't a part of my my history, but like I'm to the point now where I feel as though the whole conversation around just white supremacy in general is just tired and played out.
Hallelujah.
And it's to the point where it's like it creates this barrier in a lot of for a lot of people in a lot of people's mind where they can't see past the problem. They can't even identify a problem or even find a solution to a problem because they automatic go-to solution is just white supremacy. You know what I'm saying? Your lights went out, it's white supremacy. Not because you didn't pay the phone bill, not because
Exactly.
white supremacy.
Exactly. That's what I've been saying for a while. But if I said I get called a coon, the sellout, the this, the that, blah blah blah. But like you can't blame everything on white people. Like sometimes you have to just understand that this might be your fault.
Here's the thing.
I understand.
One thing I'll say to this is just I agree what you're saying, but what I was trying to get to is there's like a separation which we don't have. So when it comes to history, that is a part of our history. When it comes to colonialism or slavery, that's history, which is factual. Where when it comes to talking about history, like white people, when they talk about their history, they talk about events that took place. That's factual. What I think you're talking about is let's not use that as a crutch going forward, because as you said,
yes,
white supremacy didn't make you not pay your light bill. White supremacy didn't make you decide to impregnate this woman, and white supremacy did not make you make those choices. You made those choices all by yourself. So I think for me, it was just a case of saying history. We seem to try and merge everything together by saying slavery, colonialism, white supremacy, critical race theory, and it's like there's it's like history is history, and then the future that's different. I just wanted to make that abundantly clear because we do it gets muddied.
So where are we at with it? Because, and this may sound hypocritical, right? Being as though I identify as ADOS, right? So that history of slavery is entrenched in my identity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm cognizant of it. But in 2021, it's like right now, as it relates to that history, the only thing I want to come from it or even talk about as it relates to it is reparations. If we're not talking about reparations or whatever, then it's just a waste of time. Like, you know what I mean? And I think sometimes we get so caught up in the historical context and we try to make that be the reality today, right? When I don't believe ADOS are in the same position they was in even in my parents' generation. You know what I mean?
No, I hear you.
We're at a totally different spot and have a totally different role in this world. You know what I mean? And it's even like disrespect onto the struggles of my grandparents and parents. You know what I mean? To even try to identify or incorporate that struggle against white supremacy into my everyday reality. So.
And again, and this is where I wanted to make it clear with that's the problem again for us when we talk about slavery in the Caribbean or colonialism in Africa. There are unfortunate things which still it all depends on the question is how much of a lingering effect has that played. That's the question today that for some reason gets too much airtime. The effect is not as big as it once was. That's true. And I'll just talk about I think we should always remember our history, never forget it. The Jews will never forget their Holocaust. They will never forget it. That was a period in time which lasted for only like 6 years. I don't want to downplay it, but they never forget theirs. They have movies like every damn year talking about the Holocaust and Nazis. There's always some variation of a World War II film. It's crazy. They will never ever let their kids, grandkids, their great grandkids forget it. They'll never forget that. But they won't let it determine their future. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's the thing about
it empowers them though.
And that's true. It does empower them.
For
some reason,
they're simultaneously remembering their past, but then at the same time they're working, they're doing shit. You know, they're dominating the industry.
But we are though, aren't we? Let's be honest. Let's not make it out as if we're not doing anything. That's another thing I think is a bit of a trope. I don't know why. We are. We may not be where we want to be. Don't get me wrong, but we are doing things. Do you not agree with that?
I think who is we? Who is we? Because I'm ADOS. I don't believe in this blanket black identity.
Well, we're talking. This is UK perspective.
I believe
from us,
different groups are in different.
Okay, but
from us, I can talk in context of.
So for us, we're talking about that's the main base of this conversation. We are
in context of the British and I guess that people in Europe, I would say those who are proactive aren't lingering on history. Like I am from what I'm seeing, those who are lingering more on history aren't doing them a lot, unless they're historians. without if they don't have a plight or some type of motive behind it, like they're involving themselves in politics, then they're the ones lingering, aren't doing anything. They're waiting for politicians to help them do shit, and that's what I'm fed up with. You know, I've stopped following that, and that's why I'm over here on this side being proactive.
I get you,
So,
but
yeah,
the thing is though, how I hear it in how it comes across, and this is what I mean when I say that's not a representation. Is I hear, you know, some old man drunk saying, "I'm waiting for my reparations check before I actually get a job." You know what I mean? It's like, it ain't like that though, is it? I'm waiting for the government to acknowledge my role by giving me a job, because otherwise, I don't see it that way. Everyone's getting, everyone as small, as big, as large, they're doing it. They're getting on with their daily lives. It's just they still will not let people forget what it is. That's all it seems like to me. Some people profit more of it, like, you know, you call them race baiters, let's call them that. Historians again, you know.
So what do you?
David Alasaga, them kind of people, but people are just, they're still working. They still need to understand they have to, you know, feed their kids.
Let me ask you this though, right? Because we just talked about the Jews, right, and saying it's empowering them. Like, and granted, right? So I can't say much, right? I'm just asking. I'm not from the UK. I don't really But what is it that Black people are doing that's even comparable as it relates to their community? We're not talking about individuals. Like, we know there's Black people that got good jobs here and there. You know what I mean? I'm talking about as it relates to the community, because when you talk about Jews, you're talking about a community. You're not talking about an individual.
Okay, let's we talked about this actually. Education. A lot of Black people are a hell of a lot more educated, even in comparison to, I hate how they split this, white working class, particularly males. So a lot of us are getting a lot more education. A lot of us are. I looked at the stats of employment. We're not necessarily employed at necessarily the top CEOs or in the we call it the FTSE 100 groups. I think we're the least represented out of those groups, but we're highly professional. So there are steps that we are taking as a community, which, because of that, it takes time though. I'll say both.
It takes time.
For this whole to come through, where we're seeing the steps of, we're seeing more Black kids graduating from STEM subjects, top universities, Russell Group universities. We're seeing that coming through. It's just, we're like a relay race. We're behind, but we're catching up. But we're not ahead. We're catching up. That's how I'll describe it.
And let me ask you this though, right? Because like I say, I don't subscribe to the everybody Black is the same, right? So just, and this dynamic even happens in America, right? So I'm not just like trying to pick on the Caribbean, right? So when you look at education, Nigerians, Ghanaians, the numbers they're putting out is completely different from ADOS. And from what I've heard and seen, completely different than the Caribbean.
Yeah, same over here. It's the same over here. So I try not. The thing is, I like a more of a collective group, even though people don't like that. But same over here. So the Africans, particularly Nigerians, Ghanaians, their output is a hell of a lot different than Caribbeans. So, for example, if you want to put it together, Nigerians and Ghanaians, they outperform. They're the best performing Black group in the UK, without a shadow of a doubt. Caribbeans, again, when I looked at the stats, are like, yeah, they're way behind. So that's that part.
Yeah, I would say when we want to talk on that, contextualizing which groups within the Black community are doing well, I would say, again, it's the Black migrant mindset. If you look at the Caribbeans who moved to America, they have that Black migrant mindset. That's why they're also as competitive. But of course, when you come to the third generation of Black people in the UK, that's where you see a slope down. And I guess that's the context in which history, which timeline your parents came to the country. You know, the Windrush generation, they felt the blunt of racism, but then 3 generations later, you're part of the working class, while the more aggressively involved Black migrants who entered the country are more proactive for a reason. That's just the migrant mentality in any country. Yeah.
I don't even agree with that necessarily, because
go ahead.
Depending on the migrant groups, because Caribbeans in the US are migrants and they still aren't putting up those numbers. You know, even Somalis in comparison to Nigerians in America aren't putting up those numbers.
So okay. When it comes to
I guess it would look at the form of migration Whereas maybe more Africans coming from Nigeria and West Africa, they're specifically coming on like student visas and stuff like that. So if you look in America, a lot of
Yeah, I've studied some of the American stats. I would say particular islands are doing better. I think the Bahamas or Jamaican migrants are doing better than, let's say, the Haitian migrants who come from more of a desolate country. And then the Somalis come from a more asylum refugee migrant history. So you always look at the context of which that country they came from is for you to understand that. And then when it comes to like the bigger countries in West Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, they're more anglorized, they're more westernized in terms of their focus on education. That's why they do better. It's not like we're a special race or group. Our culture might promote it more, but it's because our environment hasn't affected us like the Somalis have been impacted by, you know, wars and all of that. So yeah, that's why I think it's very important to compartmentalize all these groups. We're not just one collective. You know, White Matters is great that you want to see some type of unified front, but it's very important for you to study how certain black groups mobilize or, you know,
100%.
live.
One of the reasons I brought that up, right, and I use that is because playing off of what I just said, white supremacy, how it hinders us, right? You look at West Africans, immigrants, their relationship and outlook and just how they see white people is completely different. You know, when they come here, the concept of white supremacy doesn't really exist in their mind. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's kids don't grow up believing, man, I can't do that, man. Them crackers not gonna let me up. Man, only white people could do that. So I believe it's a mentality in the culture that they're not burdened with, specifically like as it relates to white supremacy. Like, they're comfortable going into that corporate and they don't even have to internalize or even think about microaggressions. Whereas even the Caribbean, the Black Caribbean or 80 Black American, they're cognizant of like microaggressions and just that relationship with white people. And I feel like it hinders us in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Oh no, you perfectly hit on the nail, man. When it comes to it too, I know me growing up, the way I saw things traveling around the world, like with my family, is that every group of people are their own tribe. So when we see like the Caribbeans or the ADOS Americans, like we see that's one tribe, white Americans, one tribe. You know, like in our minds, like we don't put ourselves in that mix of racism and all of that, you know, conversation. If you know the comedian Godfrey in America, Godfrey, he's a Nigerian American. Yeah, he talks a lot on race and stuff like that. I remember one of his stand-up, he described his dad and how his dad just moved the whole family to Alaska with no thought of, oh, should I look for a black community or none of that. It's just like, move me anyway. He could move into the cesspool of the clan in America and he wouldn't know the difference. It's like, oh, I'm just moving to America, you know, for a better life for my family. So in an African man's mind, it's like, I'm just doing what I need to do for my family. I don't give a damn about what is going on in society right now. I'm trying to grind because back home we have our own tribal shit going on. Like, what's the difference? That's just how they see it. That's how my parents' generation see it. We have issues back home with different groups. What makes this any different? And also, it's in the West where things are more progressive. I don't have time to complain right now. I'm trying to make some moves, you know? So you definitely hit the nail, man. You definitely made a point there.
What's interesting to me though, because what I'm seeing is that works probably for one generation, maybe two at the most. But I'll be interested to see what happens after a while once you're in the West and you get bogged down by it all. Because I think you're right. If, for example, your parents will have a different mindset because they have to, if they've emigrated there, they have to make it work because at the end of the day, they have no right to the land that they're in because they have no maybe affinity to it. It's a foreign land as opposed to their homeland where they're probably complaining all day, every day about what goes wrong. It's their homeland. So I'll be interested to see that mindset, how it evolves over the generations of time that takes place where your kids, they're like, I'm American now, or I may have roots here, but no, I belong here. And now I'm going to have a different viewpoint. Will they regress? That's my word.
That's why you hit the nail there because that's why I'm here now. Because growing up in the UK, I felt also growing up watching social media. I felt I had to feel like more of an ADOS plight. I have to be more influenced by the Western experience. But then I started to acknowledge my parents' plight even more. Before, I would look at them like they're ignorant. They don't even care about the social issues. They don't care about microaggressions. That's bad. But now I look at it like, hey, that's actually a form of immunity from all this bullshit. We don't need this type of rhetoric right now. We just need to grind. So I embrace how my parents think more. So what I would say is that, yeah, there's a mix. And when it comes to like my friends, my cousins who grew up here, should they think the same way, or should they imitate the, Black Twitter generation? Everyone's saying the same thing. I wouldn't want that. I want to make that change myself. I would say there should be a difference. Like, yeah, we should act differently. If you have African background, embrace your Africanness in terms of how your parents think. Yeah, embrace the fact that you live in the West and befriend people from different countries in the diaspora, but don't think with that mentality. Even ADOS people don't want to have that mentality. They want to be free from that. Why do you want to adopt it because you're Westerner now? No. So that's what I would say to that too.
I think it's just I hear what you're saying, but you know what I think it just is? I think it just is they're just problems, just different types of problems. For example, let's go to a third world nation, type of problems that kids are going to have is there's no opportunities, corruption, and you're like, oh, here we go again. You know what I mean? I just think it's just a case of they're just problems, they're just different types of problems. Now, of course, whether we think something's bigger than other problems, again, if you don't have running water, that's a hell of a bigger problem than someone just being microaggressive to me. I agree with that. But sometimes I just think, as always, these are your problems, whether they're big or small, they're just your problems. They may be first world problems, but they're still problems nonetheless. And that's what happens, isn't it? You take on the problems on the issues because you want your place you're in to be better, even though you've had no concept of what, like, for example, people always say this when I've grown up, eat your food because there's starving kids in Africa. I'm like, well, me eating my food or not is not going to change their plight. But you see what I'm saying? So people try and use that as an example to say, stop complaining because your plight is better than the next man or the next woman's plight. I get it. But it's still problems nonetheless that you have to face. That's how I see it sometimes.
Yeah.
But I hear you.
In contrast to that, yes. I wouldn't want to
go back to the immigrant experience though, whereas you probably don't even understand how significant your problem or your plight is until you've understood the other side.
I agree. So, I agree. Yeah.
Like somebody that comes from a country where, a meal isn't to be taken for granted, you know what I'm saying, or thrown away, that's gonna resonate with them more so, even like a Nigerian with like the whole education thing, you know what I'm saying? Like being able to come to the West and sit in the classroom with the AC on high all day and just, you know what I mean? Like these things for them, it's like, oh man, this shit's sweet. I could do this all day. Like
24/7 electricity. Yeah, I hear you.
And it's free. Yeah. It's free. I ain't gotta pay nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So and to be fair, we're gonna appreciate it more. They're gonna appreciate it more than the ADOS kid that grew up here all his life in free public schools and never had to. You know what I mean?
And this is what it is. And this is where you probably never appreciate it till you get older, where you probably need to infuse somehow the migrant or the immigrant mentality with, because if you have that and you're born here, then you're thinking the sky's the limit. But how do you do that? That's the question, because that's always going to be the case. It's tough, isn't it? Because unless you've lived through it, you're not going to have the same viewpoint because you have no idea what it is. You have no idea what it is until you don't have it anymore. So yeah, I hear you. Right, so we've been talking for a while now. I'm conscious of the time. It's getting up to that 3-hour mark, and it's late here where we are. It's just gone 11:15. So I kind of just want to sort of wrap it up a little bit by but I just want to say thanks everyone in the chat. I appreciate everyone here. Make sure if you are new, hit that subscribe button, please. Like the stream as well. Make sure you do that. I appreciate everyone for coming here. Excuse me. As I was saying, I took a bit of a break. I had a bit of some issues, the personal issues I have to deal with, but I'm kind of back now. So expect more live streaming content coming up, particularly as it's Black History Month. So, but I don't know if you know, but over here it's Black History Month. So hopefully we'll have more conversations about different nuances about what's going on in how we class Black history over here. So
from a UK perspective.
Oh yeah, well, I say UK perspective, but it all for us it encompasses from the Caribbean to Africa. But yeah, from our perspective, for sure.
Right. Yeah, man. You know, I'm gonna tune in, man. You know, this is one of the only only channels I could go on with people from the UK, Africans, all type of across the diaspora, and nobody gets triggered when they hit ADOS or something. You know what I mean? So, you know, man, I'm locked in with you, man. I appreciate.
That's cool.
I appreciate the platform you got.
No, thank you. And do you know what it is about that? Just it's because a lot of us have had heat from your side first. I don't want to have this tit for tat. I try not to do that mess. As long as you're respectful, I'm respectful with you. Right. That's fine. That's how I see it. I don't really care about where you're from. It's not your fault you were born there. It's not my fault I was born here.
I don't even think it's about nobody's fault. But I get what you're saying, and you might have those type that you know, all they could bring to the conversation is just confusion behind ADOS. And if you even knew about ADOS, right, you'll know that they're not even that knowledgeable about it. You know what I mean? They just know like the surface level, you know, diaspora war type dialogue. You know what I'm saying? Reparation. You know, they can't really go too much further than that with it. You know what I mean? And I think that just close off a lot of the conversation where people don't even get the full context of what it's even about. You know, they just get triggered. And you know what happened on the other side? You know, you got, and then you know some ADOS get shell shocked and PTSD from Pan-Africans and everybody that just have a meltdown. Oh, you're African, we're all black, you have to stick together. And it's like, oh God, you know what I mean? You know, we both got our experiences, man, dealing with each other. But like I say, man, I like your platform, man, you know, and I'm locked in, man. Catch you on the next show, man. Big up to the other brother, the Nigerian brother. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, nice one, Botep. Appreciate you contributing, man.
Okay,
yeah, this was a good topic.
Yeah, man, awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'm thinking of my next topic. I forgot what the name of the live stream was going to be, but absolutely, again, this month again is Black History Month. So again, we want to bring different conversations, different people, different viewpoints. And yeah, as someone just said it, nuances to it. Absolutely. There has to be nuance to everything. History is never black and white. Now, unfortunately, history is told by the winner. That's why it's called his story or her story, however you want to have it, if you don't want to be gender specific. But yeah, so it's always nuance to history, which a lot of times I've seen for us, be honest, on the left-hand side, it never seems to be that way. It's always narrative over factual or contextual information. So yeah, absolutely. So again, the Duke, always a pleasure, always to have your balanced viewpoints. I do appreciate you on my channel. So yeah, as always, you are always welcome. But yeah, gonna wrap up today.
Thank you for having me, bro. Yeah. Peace out.
No worries. We're gonna wrap up today. Thanks to everyone in the chat. Thanks for everyone on the playback. I hope you have a great evening. I appreciate you all. Again, please subscribe if you are new. I see some new faces, so please make sure you're subscribed, hit that bell notification, all that good stuff. And yeah, we are out of here.